We are broadcasting. Let's see, do we have Bob Tatoma here? We do. Okay, very good. Becca, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Hey, all right. So are you going to present the warrant articles to us and then the budgets?
Yeah, we're gonna walk through that stuff.
All right. So let's see. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 1st Grafton Finance Committee public hearing. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Grafton Finance Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort is being made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided in the order. A reminder that persons that would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by visiting the Zoom link found on the town website. I ask everybody to please mute themselves on your computer if you're not speaking. We'll need to take attendance to acknowledge that everyone's here and can hear me and engage in the discussions. For the Finance Committee members, we will have a roll call vote for all votes. So we obviously have a lot of panelists tonight. So again, please stay on mute unless you have something to comment on. If you'd like to speak next, I will do my absolute best to kind of watch the screen, and you can raise your hand and I'll recognize you and we'll see how that goes. If that doesn't work, we're gonna have to try something else. I've never had a webinar with this many attendees, so this should be interesting. If you want to speak, please put yourself back on video and just raise your hand, and then I'll see that you want to speak. Let's see, what else did I have? Eric Swenson, can you monitor the Q&A? And if there are any questions on Q&A, just raise your hand and let me know that there's a question, and then you can read the question.
Sure.
Okay, great. So Becca, did you want to start with the annual town meeting warrants?
Take roll, Matt.
What's that?
Don't you have to take a roll call for present?
I do have to take a roll call. All right, thank you. That's the second meeting in a row that I have almost started without doing that. Colleen Roy.
Present.
Chris McGoldrick.
Present.
Sue Fiacco.
President.
Do you have multiple computers, or do you have a headset or a phone or something that's connected?
I have nothing connected. Oh my goodness.
All right, I'm just going to leave you muted.
Thank you.
Did you join twice, Sue? You did. Did you call in?
I did not.
All right. You might have to rejoin, but I'm going to remove one of you. Let's see, where did you go? There you are. Sue, can you try talking one more time?
She's muted. Sue, you're muted.
Can't seem to unmute you. Sue, can you disconnect and rejoin?
Her microphone is slashed. She's muted.
Yeah, I see that, but I can't unmute her. The unmute button isn't working. Sue, can you disconnect and rejoin? Does anybody have her cell phone number? Just text her and let her. All right, let's continue with the roll call. Barry Smith,
Present.
Norm Crapo,
Present.
Daniela Sharma,
Oh,
Present.
Sue Robbins,
Present.
Dan Kusher,
Present.
Eric Swenson,
Present.
Heather McHugh,
Present.
Mary Oliver,
present.
Anita Patel,
Present.
Barbara Conley,
Present.
Karen Sepatelli,
Present.
Bob Berger,
Present.
Leah Cameron,
Present.
Paul Carnoyer,
Present.
Tim McInerney,
McInerney here.
Justin Souza,
Justin Souza here.
Amy Perkins,
Present.
Rebecca Meekins,
Yeah.
Beth Patch, Beth Patch. Looks like you're muted. My unmute button is not working. And Beth Galloway.
Present.
All right, let's see. Sue, are you there?
I am now here.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, Becca, so did you want to go through the warrants, please?
Sure. Do you want me to share a screen that shows the articles as we walk through them, or does everyone have them? How do you want to?
It would be great if you want to present. That way everybody can look at them together and you can work through them in the order that you think is best.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna start with the special.
Okay, sounds good.
Tim, do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, I mean, Article 1, as everyone knows, just a couple logistics things, if I can, Mr. Chairman. It's a 9 a.m. start time for the special, and the annual will start at 9:30. We had some logistics calls that you were on, and maybe you covered this when I was getting the stuff off the copier. So if you did, should I not cover some of those logistics?
I haven't. So, yeah, if you want to just take 5 minutes and kind of walk through what town meeting is going to look like, that would be great, because I'm not sure if, the other committee members have heard any of that. So, and just for the, public's sake, it'd be good to kind of, I think as many times as we can go through the 5-minute spiel on how we're going to do it, it's probably good. So, yeah, go for it.
All right, I'm going to try and do it in less than 5. So we're going to utilize the high school field. We think we can fit about 900 people on that field. We're also going to use the gymnasium. We're going to check people inside the basketball court. They will have to queue up around the middle school, up in front of the high school, come in, check in. We will have Wi-Fi capability, so we can use the iPads, poll pads to check people in. They'll come out of the tennis court, either into the gym or straight down to the field. We're working on logistics in terms of pathways and signage and so forth. We had a meeting on site today. We will start at 9 a.m. We want people to register early. 8 a.m. is when registration right now will start for the voters. We are talking to Candy about pushing that up by half an hour just to give people more time. The people in the gym, obviously, those are for people that we want to preserve that are adverse to sun and heat and have mobility issues and so forth. So we're going to have probably 175 chairs set up in the gym, and there'll be a projection screen and a moderator and 2 microphones inside the gym. And on the field, there'll be social distancing guidelines followed as best we can relative to seating. We'll have 4 microphones. We will have some CERT volunteers that'll be there directing traffic. We'll have some fire volunteer folks on scene as well. Some MRC folks to wipe down microphones as needed. People will be required to have a mask, bring a mask, or we will give you a mask when you arrive and check in. Everyone will be required to wear a wristband to vote. Ray had a great idea in terms of not having, if there was a ballot vote, we wouldn't have to check people in a second time. If anybody's gone through that, it knows it's very lengthy. So we'll be able to use the wristbands to get yes, no votes and vote and move that process along. So the annual will start at 9:30, and The rain date will be the 21st of June, Sunday. And then if it was to rain on both days, we would have to make other arrangements, and the moderator at that point can control when the next town meeting would be held. But I do think we're leaning towards the day before the 19th July, so the 18th of July, the day before graduation, so we don't have to deploy 3 sets of apparatus to hold a meeting on the field. We would use theirs. So that's kind of the long and short of it. If anyone has questions about some of that, there's a lot to it. There's a lot more than I've given you, but that's the gist of it.
And so just for finance committee's sake, I think we're going to be kind of seated in the, seated in the, like the, obviously socially distanced, but in the first row. And then we'll have a mic available to us as a committee. So if anybody needs to comment on any of the articles or, make any commentary and generally to town meeting, we'll have that mic available to us. Thanks, Tim.
All right. So Becca, this Excel spreadsheet you sent me earlier transfers FY20 budget. We have a number of transfers. I just want to qualify some of these. COVID-19 changed a couple things. So we could go right up until the date of town meeting. We'll keep the finance committee apprised and the select board apprised if we do make any changes. Becca, do you mind running through the transfer to and from for police, fire, recreational? What's important to note with this, it's less than a quarter percentage, 0.025 basically. It's 148,000, which is already appropriated in the budget. We're transferring within line items. There's no additional appropriation. There's no free cash covering any of these transfers. So I just wanted to give you that broad brush, and Becca can take you through the detail.
All right, sure. So I believe FinCom members have this spreadsheet. I sent it to Matt late this afternoon. I apologize about that, but I'm going to run through them really quick, and then I'll just ask if you have specific lines that you want to elaborate on. We'll do that at the end. But since we're all looking at the same thing, we're going to transfer 50,000 from police personnel.
Becca, can we put that up on screen just so that the public can see it? Is that possible?
Yeah, let me see if I have it. Hold on, I'm going to stop.
I have it here, but I don't have the ability to share the screen. But I know you have it, Becca, so you just sent it to me. I can send it back to you if you want.
I think I can just. Can people see that?
Yes.
Okay. So like Tim said, we had a lot of expenses related to COVID-19. An important detail about a lot of these COVID-19 expenses, we are applying for funds through the CARES Act that were made available to the town. So a lot of these expenses are hopefully and likely going to be covered. However, we do need to make these adjustments in light of some unforeseen circumstance in the future where the funding doesn't come in before the end of the fiscal year. We do want to make sure that our books are balanced for the close of the year, pending those dollars from the government.
So what's going on with the CARES Act? So we have the application going in this week, or has that gone in already?
It's, if I may, it's due on Friday. We did an initial cost estimate. It's both what's occurred to date from the state of emergency date and looking forward into the future. It's for 1.66 million. And the school department is really going to have to, get the lion's share of that money because they have to figure out what's going to happen in the fall. So they're working with, lots of people at the state and internally to have meetings to figure out how to allocate that cost through a web-based program for the state through ANF. So we've started it. We have the application ready. They know who the contact people are. We've signed documents. We just need to fill in the boxes with numbers, and we'll certainly get it in for Friday. There's no doubt about that.
Okay. So what I think I heard you just say is we have a kind of preliminary in. We think it's about 1.6. The school's going to incur some additional cost for like a remote program?
I don't know what their plan is for opening in the fall. They're working on that now, but what I'm saying is a lion's share of that 1.6 should and would be allocated to whatever that budget is if it's needed.
Okay, and to make up for the, because it seems like there's a potential 10% decrease in state aid, which would be about $1 million for them, right?
It does not cover lost revenue. So unexpected revenues to the town, the CARES Act doesn't allow for that. It has to be not budgeted and a cost associated with dealing with the crisis of COVID-19.
Okay. So I'm sorry to dig into this so much, but it's, so what are the type of costs that we've incurred that would make up that 1.6?
We haven't even got close to the 1.6, but the listing that we had out there was everything from working remotely, Zoom product, computer deployment. Becca, what were some of the other bigger ones we had?
We have overtime for specific staff associated with either health or administration. We have PPE costs. We have costs for infrastructure changes to the municipal center and other town buildings in order to make them safe for staff and the public when we do finally return. Those are the bigger ones.
Okay, so 1.6 was the total that we could get, but basically they have to be qualifying expenses, and we're never going to get there. Do you have any ballpark at all on how much we might be able to recover?
Well, I think we're going to even town meeting expense for the whole, the chairs, the jumbotron, all that stuff to facilitate that.
Yep.
It's due to COVID-19 and it's not budgeted. So that's $20,000 right there. I think the 1.6, depending on what the school district comes up with for a strategy, we can spend all that money.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right. So many of these things in red there are some COVID-19 threads in them, but members that have been on this committee for a long time will know the police grant for 911 is not a given always, but when we get it, we always move money from personnel to expenses and so forth. So Becca, go ahead. You can keep going. Some of it, to my point was it's not all COVID related. Some of it's just housekeeping.
Yeah, a lot of it is COVID related. I'm going to run through this pretty quick because I think most people have it and the explanations are on the screen. So you're going to notice a lot of these transfers are coming from fire personnel. Calls were way down in the last few months, largely because of the decrease in transportation, just fewer people on the roads, fewer accidents to report to. So the fire personnel line is only about 50% expended, which is incredibly low. That's a pretty large line item. So a lot of these transfers are going to come from there. Obviously, it's a one-off given the stay-at-home order. It's probably not something that we're going to see in the future, but it does free up some cash for us to move around to cover some of these COVID-19 expenses in the hopes that we will be able to recoup those funds from the CARE Act. So 5,000 fire personnel, select board personnel. This is Joanne Duncan. She's been working a lot given the work around COVID-19, generating mailers, town meeting coordination, and the more regular schedule that the select board has had as a result of COVID-19. They've met, I think, for 5 weeks in a row now, almost, which is pretty atypical for them. MIS, that, like Tim said, this is largely from the deployment of laptops, hotspots, getting people up on VPN, getting people able to be working remotely, a lot of that unforeseen costs due to COVID-19. Municipal center personnel in attempting to get our buildings up and ready as quickly as possible once we learned from the governor that we would be, able to reopen. That's caused a OT shortage for the municipal center personnel. Those guys have been working overtime, trying to fit the municipal center with lots of infrastructure changes, but putting up glass or plastic partitions in doorways and in windows, taping of the floors, signage. So that's largely due to COVID-19. Building department expenses, they purchased some additional PPE for their staff because they've been coming in regularly throughout the stay-at-home order to get permits out the door, and the permit numbers are way up, so they did need to purchase some additional supplies for that. Board of Health personnel, this is Nancy Connors. She's the admin assistant to the Board of Health. She's been working nonstop, as I'm sure you can understand, all related to COVID-19. So we'll need to add some funds to her personnel line. Unclassified personnel, this is health insurance. We are pretty much right down to the penny on health insurance this year. We're even, but we do often have HRA expenses that come in after the end of the fiscal year. Those are reimbursements that that employees get under what's the agreement called, Tim? I'm blanking. It's the
PEC.
thank you.
Public Employee Committee.
Yes. So it's basically just a bargaining unit for health-related issues for employees. So we're going to transfer $15,000 that will cover those HRA expenses after the close of the fiscal. Elections and registrations, they're seeing a lot of additional expense related to COVID-19, as you can imagine. They've been doing mailers, an increase in absentee ballots. They're also expecting to need additional police officers for the outdoor town meeting, given the traffic and the people on the field. So that's an additional cost.
So I just wanted to thank you guys for sending out those mailers. There's been very good response, I think, from that. That was an excellent move. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we do have another one going out, hopefully, and then I hope in the next, I'll say week, but it may be week and a half, 2 weeks, on town meeting. So we'll have detail on, the change in venue for town meeting being outside on the high school field, sort of a traffic pattern flow for people to figure out, if you're coming in, where to go to get registered and where to go to sit. So that'll be going out in the next week or two.
Fantastic.
Keep an eye out for that. Where am I? Recreation. So the recreation department, I'm not sure that this has been made entirely public yet, but the recreation department has chosen to move forward with not having summer programming this year, given all the constraints around COVID-19. We're just not confident that we can keep people safe. We're not confident that we'll have staff. And we're also, as of right now, not planning to open the beach for all those same reasons. So there's going to be additional funds in the FY20 personnel budget and recreation for not doing that programming. The recreation director is planning to move that money into expenses and hopefully do some infrastructure projects. Try to get playgrounds, ADA accessible, any things that we just, are hard to get to in the day-to-day when we're doing programming and things like that. So this felt like a good opportunity for us to try to address some of those infrastructure changes. And then the last one, Council on Aging. Barbara had some additional funds in her personnel line given the last few months, we haven't had a chef or a part-time activities coordinator come in on an hourly basis. So she'd like to transfer those funds into expenses to go towards a new freezer. The one that they have now is old and it's leaking and it needs to be replaced. So
Rebecca, just so that the committee knows, this recreational seasonal personnel, this theme is going to carry forward. Obviously, July 1 starts in 4 weeks. So if we don't have programming, we want to make the recommendation and we'll get it. Jen's working on a list of the ADA and programmatic enhancements that they're going to move forward with the personnel dollars that are in those budgets now and move them to expenses. So you'll see this move here for fiscal 20. You will also see another change in fiscal 21. Mostly with the beach, you can make a business case for it. The general fund probably supports 30,000, maybe 40,000 a year for the beach, not knowing what the draw will be and if people will buy passes or day passes. Just an estimate. It's our best guess in terms of total loss in addition to that 40 grand, would be another 30 or 40. So we figured we would minimize that loss in general fund revenue of 70K and just move all the personnel costs associated with the beach into those improvements to those various parks. So we're foregoing, 21 activities to do infrastructure improvements that she's working to identify that list of where those dollars would actually go to.
Okay.
Well, that was one. Any questions on one? Do we want me to just run through and then come back? How do you want this to work, Matt?
Are there any questions from the committee on warrant Article 1? Nope, go ahead.
Becca, you got to scroll down. I keep trying to scroll, but it's your screen.
Sorry.
So snow and ice, I think we had 86,000 instead of me guessing. Becca, do you know the exact number?
I'm just gonna put my notes screen up. It's messy, but it might be easier if we just do it this way.
Okay, thanks.
So there's a current deficit of 87,887 in the snow and ice account. All bills have been paid relative to FY20 snow and ice. So that's definitely the final figure there. We have about $80,000 in a streetlight article warrant article from last year that was funded in the event we didn't get the Green Communities grant. We wanted to make sure we could still do that project. We did end up getting the grant, so we do still have leftover funds in that account. So we'll be using the majority of those funds to shore up the majority of the account. There'll still likely be a balance of about $7,000 or $8,000 that will have to come from free cash. So if you see here, this is the current balance of free cash. Given the transfer to make the snow and ice account whole, this would be the approximate balance after that transfer.
Got it, thanks.
Becca, you can handle 3 too. You got it.
I'm just going to keep going until someone.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So payment of prior fiscal year prior fiscal year bills. We have, I think, about 4 bills. We pay thousands of bills every year in the municipal center. Sometimes things get missed. This is what we have outstanding right now. It amounts to about $740. That'll be free cash used to.
Yep, moving on.
Yeah. So as you can see here, you're gonna have a running tally of free cash at the bottom in articles where we use free cash. So this.
Very good. Yeah, thanks.
Right. Second vacation buyback. This is where we transfer funds for employees who we know are retiring or leaving, or we anticipate will be. We do expect at least one employee to be leaving us. So we will be funding this article with $10,000 funded with free cash. This will, again, approximate balance of free cash at the bottom. We're going to skip over affordable housing CPC articles. If you're good with that.
Yep,
Okay.
very good.
Article 6 is an easement. This is for a project that was actually done, I think, about a year or so ago, maybe longer. It's for some underground utilities that were put up at the beach. It's just a simple easement so that National Grid has access to that infrastructure should they need to come in and make any adjustments. So really just a housekeeping thing. Article 7, Tim, do you want to talk about this? You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead. You're doing great.
All right. So we've put together this article to temporarily extend the leave provisions under the personnel bylaw for the town. Under the personnel bylaw, employees are allowed to roll over up to 10 days of vacation time into the following fiscal year with Tim's approval. Given everything that happened this year with COVID, people not being able to travel, people being stuck at home, we're going to make the request to town meeting that they extend those leave provisions, so allow people to carry over an extra 10 days into fiscal year 21. So people will be able to carry over up to 20 days. This will still be at the town administrator's discretion, and there will be some expiration date on there.
Okay.
So people can use it just try to prevent any liability. And there's still, we're going to take a look at the numbers when we get close to town meeting in terms of the requests.
Yep.
And then it will be up to the town administrator to determine whether or not he wants to move forward, given that liability.
Okay. Any sort of ballpark on that? So we'll have an accrual liability, basically?
Honestly, I know that the requests have come in, but I don't know the number right now. We could get you a ballpark right now.
Okay, yeah. Obviously, you're going to get additional requests, and I'm just curious, and yeah, what that liability might be, and like what's your thinking around? Is there a threshold where you say, oh, it's probably not worth it, or because it seems like a really good benefit for obviously people can't really take vacation, so it'd be nice when they get back to work to be able to, go with their families to take vacations. Go ahead, Colleen.
So my only question on that is it says at the sole discretion of the town administrator. Can you give me an example of some scenario where you might not allow the rollover?
I've never had an event where I've denied anyone's request, so I cannot give you one. But the charter, the bylaw calls for the town administrator to be the person who decides whether you roll over any of them. In terms of liability, right, we want people to take the vacation. It doesn't cost me. I only budget for 52 weeks of their work. I don't budget for 55 if they have 3 weeks vacation. So it wouldn't per se be a liability. And that's what I was trying to hedge against, to be honest. I want to not, if someone were to leave me on July 15th and just carry it over 20 days, and then they have a new allotment of 5 weeks and they quit or they get fired, God forbid, that, I don't want to have that kind of scenario. So that's what we're trying to hedge against. So we know what the liability is in terms of if they were to leave, and that's what I'm trying to guard against.
So you're hedging that with the expiration, basically.
Yeah, if they're a long-term employee, because the state law, people don't know this, but state law requires any accumulated vacation you have upon departure, whatever you have in the bank at that particular moment, you get to be compensated for that vacation. So we're working with legal counsel on how we can just make it PTO and not make it subject to that situation I just described. So we're still working out those details, but there doesn't seem to be a clear path. That's why we're kind of hedging downward.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
So Article 8, you want to do Article 8, Becca?
Yeah, sure. I can keep going. So I'm sure many people on FinCom are aware of the 8 Pine Street property. We entered into a sales partnership agreement with the state, I don't know, 8 months ago, maybe 6 months ago.
August. Yeah, it was August.
August. Okay. For 8.8 acres of land at 8 Pine Street, we put together an RFP. We got, I believe, four proposals that we reviewed. We will be making a final recommendation to the select board, I believe tomorrow night, for GSX is going to be the company that we recommend. They're proposing to put about 300 units of housing on that 8.8 acres with 11,000 square feet of commercial retail for a purchase price of $1.75 million. That will obviously have to be split with the state. I think it's about it says 60-40, but I think it's actually 55-45 split. There's still some steps to go through. You have to do a P&S, and then there's a due diligence period that the group will get. Hoping for a closing in the middle of next fiscal is probably the best guess. January, February. Tim, I don't know if you have a better idea of timeline, but I think that's probably our best guess right now.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So this article will allow us to actually dispose of that property and enter into that P&S with GSX should the board choose to move forward with our recommendation.
Got it. Any idea what that commercial component of that development would be?
In terms of the square, well, Becca, I'll let just quickly.
Well, they said 11,000 square feet. Like, what would be there? What type of commercial business?
It would be from retail to professional industrial. So you could have a coffee shop, you could have a restaurant. They have design features that they're hoping to get a restaurant with an second tier patio seating up above near a parking garage that they're proposing to complement the MBTA station. So
Nice.
it'll be amenities that obviously we're creating workforce housing, which we need. We've done a whole study of the corridor for Route 30, and this was one critical component. You know, UPS, when they build the train station, the Route 30 Afonso project that's on Institute Road, and the front of that where we changed the zone last year for mixed use. So that'll be housing and commercial development along Route 30. So that corridor within, you know, if you drew a circle a mile around the train station, you start to build this village inside of North Grafton, which contains housing and mixed use commercial space.
Nice. Okay, thanks. Any questions from the committee? All right, moving on.
So that, just so you know, that project is estimated, I think in their pro forma, they had like a $75 million investment. So in terms of, you know, creating tax impact, it's very significant.
Good, great.
All right, that is it for the special. So, do you want to start with the annual, Matt?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Annual town meeting, 20th of June, 9:30 on the high school football field. Article 1, pretty standard. Aside from accepting the town report, we're not aware of any other reports from officers, boards, or committees, but that could still come up, obviously. There is one trustee being appointed for Nelson Park Memorial Trustee Group. Bridget Weber has made a request, and that committee has, or the trustee group has recommended her to be put forward for town meeting.
Okay, can you just stop with, go back to Article 1, I'm sorry, we talked to Ray today. He's not aware of anybody making reports, but there's a lot of members on various committees on this call that if you want to make a presentation or a report or an update on library building project, DPW building project, or some other project, let Ray know and we'll make appropriate accommodations to get you to be able to present under Article 1.
Very good, thanks.
All right. Article 3, Blackstone Valley. This is our cost for the students that attend BVT at a regional school. This fiscal year, yeah, that's right. That dollar figure is $814,270. So it is up from last fiscal year. Article 4 is the principal and interest for the school district expansion project, which was voted on a number of years ago at town meeting as debt exclusion. That dollar figure is $48,227. So when you see the line in the budget that says BVT under non-appropriated, it includes both the principal and interest and the funds to actually send to the school for those students that attend. This payment is the last payment for this debt for BVT is FY25. So the end is in sight.
Excellent.
Article 5 is the FY21 budget. Tim, do you want to start with this, or?
Yeah, we can go through it. There was a pre-COVID budget that we had presented, and we talked to Finance Committee about it and the board, and we ran with numbers with increasing revenue from state aid to building permits, marijuana fees, and then one other big item. COVID comes along and kind of throws that revenue increase estimate out the window by $617,599. So we had to find ways to offset that. So there's two ways that we did it. We cut some expenses and then offset some expenses to articles like free cash for police and fire equipment, and some of DPW reduction for Chapter 90 and tree removal and replacement. We have a warrant article for that, which we passed maybe last October, for dead and dying trees and replacing them so they don't cause a hazard. So we'll use that money instead of using the general fund money. We will use Chapter 90 money for specific projects that we will have to do applications for, which will be no easy task, but we'll have to submit to the state, get approval from the board, and then move forward with those projects. There's a lot of things allowed under Chapter 90, from roadway improvements, design work, curb replacement, fixing potholes, guardrails, line painting. There's a lot of things that we would use out of our professional technical that we will offset or, go to Chapter 90 for those particular items. So that's kind of how we balanced in a fast way. We did a long presentation to the board 2 weeks ago and then last Tuesday, and I'm sure a lot of you might have seen those. So this budget as it stands now, we did have a reduction in estimated revenue. We are using free cash to offset some of those bigger operational capital needs, if you will, that were in the request that were funded pre-COVID. But now we've moved those out to free cash. And they're all in this warrant article that the community will vote on. Becca put together this sheet in terms of showing you how much municipal operations will get, how much the school will get. The total new money when we started this was, I think, 2.2 million. And then obviously we had a reduction down to 1.6 after COVID. So we had to make the budget fit inside of there. So we got to the schools, they got an increase of 1.4 million. And then I don't know what the municipal side was, Becca. If you want to put up that slide, you can do that.
Yeah, I can put that up. I'm just, you can see this without me starting the PowerPoint?
I can see half of it.
Yep.
You can see half of it?
Yeah, because I have people on my screen.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the major budget categories after the reductions. I do want to point out one thing that is different from the last budget table that I sent the committee. Given the adjustments that we just talked about with recreation and the decision, our decision not to move forward with the beach and summer programming, there is going to be an adjustment to the recreation budget for FY21. It's not going to change the bottom line, but they're going to move funds from personnel for those part-time people that they're not going to hire for the beach and for programs. And we're going to put that money into the P&T line so that they can do some of those infrastructure projects. So again, it doesn't change the bottom line, but it does change just those two lines in the budget table. So I will get that amended table out to you guys after this meeting.
Okay. Any questions on that from the committee? Very good. Thanks.
So if people want me to go through the presentation I gave to the board, I can do that for 21. I have a feeling that people might be more concerned about the contingent budget, but
Yeah, I think your feeling is right.
okay. So we'll move to 6.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Sorry, Tim, a couple times tonight you've said you're using free cash, but I thought it was stabilization. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, my recommendation's always been stabilization. From a perspective of actually having reserves, when you talk about a bond rating, you talk about cumulative liquidity. So it's free cash and or stabilization. So yeah, I'm using it interchangeable. But yeah, I do want to use stabilization because when we close on that property, I want to be able to show the community and bond rating agencies, we made a commitment. We use this one-time revenue to offset these expenses. We've closed on this parcel for $800,000. We want to move that money back into stabilization. So your long answer, but yes, I do. My druther would be to use stabilization.
Okay. And we're going to go through the kind of department budgets in an upcoming agenda item, right, Tim?
Tonight or another night?
Yeah,
What-
tonight.
I figure under these articles, we would do that.
Okay, well, so if we want to do it that way, then do you want to just go through, I think you guys have a budget table for the proposed operational budget under that article?
Under Article 5?
Yes,
Yep.
awesome. And
So
then, if-
Becky, are you sharing that screen, Beck?
You want to go through the budget table? Is that what I'm hearing?
yeah,
Yeah.
just quickly, and then if any, so we've got all of your department heads here. I'd like them, if they would want to have an opportunity to, we're in our public hearing, so to have them have an opportunity to really speak to what this budget does, or if they have anything that they really, want to say.
So for everybody who's watching, and even department heads, we set up this table for Candy to read at town meeting with the department number, the account name, and then the town administrator number all the way to the right. We added the change dollar and change percent just so people could kind of follow along. But this is what actually creates the levy limit and what sets the tax rate at the end of the day. So that's kind of how it works. So if we want to start with any particular line, like Board of Selectmen 19, I would ask that, finance committee members who've been here a long time can look at these numbers historically and see where those adjustments have been made to balance the budget in the past. So this isn't truly reflective of, what we had to do in 12 and 13 before we got to 14 and had the override. So there's been, a lot of spikes and ebbs in various line items throughout this budget.
Yeah.
So Board of Selectmen, the 30,000 that's in there, it's not a $4,000 increase for the person's pay. It's just reflective of the hourly rate for when she was hired, and the amount of hours that she'd work split between CPC and the select board has solidified better than it was when we originally set the original budget. So that's what, no one's getting a 15.4% increase. That's just the total line item increase. Becca, what am I missing on that?
Nothing.
And then expenses, it's not fair to kind of look at this because this is what people read, but when you guys get into the detail as you do, you'll see, account 122 with every line item with detail of what they plan to spend money on in each of these things. So I don't want to, we'll be here for a long time if we did that. So I'm assuming you don't want me to do that.
I don't think we want to do that. Does anybody have an appetite for? I'm not seeing any. Okay. Yeah. So if you just want to give us the highlights, I think that's fine.
Becca, then give us highlights. I mean, if that first slide you had up a couple minutes ago that kind of looked at the overall spending category, I think that gives us a frame of reference when we look at the details of public safety and then breaking that down with police and fire and even, general government with treasurer collector, GIS, all those pieces kind of, you see the subtotal, but then you can see where the breakdown is and see how small those numbers are.
Can you talk about the HR piece a little bit?
Yeah, Becca, stop moving that screen, would you?
Oh, I'm trying to. Did I miss HR? Oh, I
No,
did.
it's up above. There you go. Human resources. So for people that are newer, human resources, certainly under the charter rests with the TA. The administration of payroll, benefit administration was in the treasurer collector's office. We had reductions in staff there. We had a part-time person, which is Joan, who's still part-time, does a great job. And we need, with the amount of employees we have and the number of programs we have from Maya program, safe work environment, health benefits, retirees, onboarding new employees, we need a full-time dedicated staff for that. So one person is the person right now, part-time. We want to move that to full-time. I will tell you that there was the way we're paying for this. We had some departures of higher paid employees, and now I've hired them at lower pay, and I've used that money to offset and allow this increase to happen in human resources. In terms of the detail of what they do, Becca, you have a nice sheet on the differences in some of the cost savings that we could potentially get if we take better advantage of the Maya programs and the reward programs for workers' comp audits. And health trainings and careness and wellness programs. Do you want to cover those?
Has there been any discussion about maybe using the approach like we did with, because I heard some commentary about this being like a lot of the extra hours going into benefits enrollment and whatnot. That's kind of a temporary, a few weeks kind of thing. Could we use an approach like bringing in some consulting like we did with the year-end close in the town and all that, instead of kind of having do you really think it's going to be a full-time role? Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, benefit administration for health insurance is probably, if I had to benchmark it against something, it's 18% of our time. So, but there's a multitude of other things that are beneficial that go into the full 100% for the increase of a full-time person.
I can just, if you want me to, I can just run through a few other things that Joan has taken on and will take on, and I think that there's probably some cost savings associated with those things that she's going to take on, which will be beneficial for us. So she's supported and trained a lot of the HR staff on the school side, the new payroll person. She does EAP, sets up EAP trainings regularly throughout the year for staff, which again provides us with credits through our insurance carrier, which in turn turns into savings at the end of the fiscal. She's supported us with employee relations, workplace environment problems. She's taken on a lot of records and archives, updating and making sure that we're in compliance with newer laws. She has taken on the audits for the town and the workers' compensation and the senior work-off program, which it does only happen once a year, but it takes up probably 2 solid weeks of time. And that's a lot of time that she doesn't have to do other things. So there's probably savings to be had there too. The workers' comp audit, you need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that their estimates are right based on our payroll for the year. That's how they generate the cost to us. So if they're wrong in one fiscal year, it could end up with us paying a much higher premium than is necessary. So it's a really important thing that we need her to continue doing, because it does save us money in the long run.
Okay. Can you just talk? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So the additional hours will allow her to get deeper into workers' comp administration and get us on a regular training program for all staff with respect to workers' comp. Like Tim said, keep people updated on OSHA changes, safety trainings. These come back in the form of credits that can be applied to town insurance costs. Assisting with contract negotiations with analysis of surrounding communities and comparable positions for leverage in negotiations. There's a cost savings there, certainly. And it's a cost that we don't end up having to pay labor council to do. So that would be extremely beneficial. And a new employee recruitment process. We've long since tried to get a formal process with a packet, and we've sort of had pieces of it here and there, but we really, to make sure that we recruit people and keep them and that they're satisfied working for us. There's lots of data out there that says, the first 2 weeks you have somebody is the most important time to get them acclimated and satisfied. Unfortunately, we don't have a great process right now. It's piecemeal and it needs to be more formalized, and we definitely want that Joan to take that on. So those are just a handful of things, but happy to.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and thank you so much for going through all that. For the positions that people moved on and we hired lower, I guess a more of a starting type of role. Do we have a plan for, I guess from a finance committee standpoint, we shouldn't expect next year or the year after to get a big raise for any of those folks, should we? What's the plan for those positions?
Well, generally speaking, there's a class and comp plan that we established in 2012. The ranges are pretty wide because I didn't want to have to do it again in 5 years, so it's probably time to do that again. The people that were hired, say, within the past 2 to 3 years are certainly more competitive to the market.
Okay.
But, the market changes constantly, and I have staff that, make good points relative to their salary to the market. And then you look internally to see what the equities are amongst department heads that no one has the same duties, but they have similar responsibilities. And that gets tricky as well. So redoing that class and comp plan, interviewing those folks, Joan would facilitate that next round, if you will. But no, I don't anticipate, to answer your short answer is, we depending on how this article goes and the next article goes, we had a step plan in place for, say, the library director that was underpaid. We got her at a very good rate. But we knew quickly that her programmatic skills and her professionalism were unparalleled. And if we wanted to keep her, we had to compensate her. So, it's a little bit of a balancing act. What I can afford now, I give you the best I can, they take the job. And then when you realize that you might be at risk, you need to put people on a plan. So we did that with Beth and a couple other employees that don't jump to the front of my mind, to get them more competitively compensated with the market.
Got it. I guess, from a finance committee standpoint, we'd definitely appreciate that stepwise approach versus an all at once. If we know it's there and, as we're recognizing it, to be able to bring people up more incrementally rather than kind of all at once, that presents a real challenge for us. And obviously there's all of the morale issues and just, it's usually relatively small dollars, but it creates a lot of contentious discussion relative to the budget. So anyways, so I think you probably know that already, but Finance Committee would definitely like to see a stepwise approach for all of these positions if we can do it. Go ahead, Barry.
For the town accountant, do we anticipate the need for additional professional and technical to bring on the new town accountant?
Right now, being the end of the fiscal year, we're in a very difficult spot. We have the ad out for the new town accountant, not so easily replaced from that standpoint. So we will have Eric Concheriff on staff to help us close books so we can transition until we hire someone. We've had a long-standing note in the audit about having a finance director, which we just never were able to come up with the 125 or 130 grand that position demands. So we have a town accountant position that we're going to do our best to find someone that's qualified and can get everything done that needs to be done with the dollars we have. But for short term, we will rely on some outside consulting to get us closed and get free cash certified.
Okay.
Got it. Thanks. Okay, I think we can move on.
So this is all post-COVID, right? Becca, this
Yep.
is the budget, not contingent.
Yeah, this is Article 5, so this is the balanced, reduced budget, if you will. There's probably not a ton that this committee doesn't already know. Obviously, this is a big one here, planning board. This is the economic coordinator, which was reduced out of the budget in an effort to balance. You'll see that number pop up in the contingent budget. I'm just trying to hit the highlights here. I know you guys don't want us to walk through this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, retirement and pensions, this is largely Worcester Regional Retirement pension liability for the year. As you know, we're going to have a 0% for health. Really helpful in a year like this.
But Becca, you got to qualify a little bit on that we have active employees and we have retirees. Active employees renew July 1, retirees are January 1st. So that both of their costs associated with those plans are in this number. So we have to gauge where we might be in January as well as July. So that's
Okay.
what that number is indicative of.
Yeah. Thank you. Fire department personnel. This is the fire chief. This is a big number, 100,000 or 110,000 of this is the fire chief. Just so the finance committee is aware, if they weren't already, we did make application for the fire safety grant. Is that what it's called? Fire safety.
The SAFER grant.
SAFER grant, yep.
Safety grant. Probably two weeks ago now, maybe. So that application. So we do expect to hear back. Hopefully, I think July is what we were told. So we'll know fairly soon after the start of the fiscal, whether or not we'll get those funds from that grant.
Okay, did you say 110 for the chief? I thought it was 130.
So we only added 110 into the budget. We're hoping that we're pretty confident that the fire personnel line will be able to supplement that additional $15,000, depending on who we get for a candidate. We're not out. We haven't put the ad out yet, but we have developed the position profile, and we're pretty much ready to hit go. So that's definitely coming soon.
Stay on that point for 1 second. I just want to make clear to the committee that a lot of the personnel drivers are tied to calls and responses. So if calls are down, we turn back a lot of money. If they're up, we need more money. So I just want to make that point clear. The other point is the SAFER grant is a 3-year grant. It pays 75% for year 1 and 2, and then only 25% for year 3. But it only covers 75% of a firefighter's salary. It will not cover the chief in its entirety. So it's important to note that distinction. We did ask 585,000, Becca, is that the number? 535?
Yeah, that sounds right.
So over 3 years, so you can do the math on what 75, 75, and 25 will be. So we're confident that that number, including the personnel and the movement that happens with calls, will be fine if we get the grant. You can actually probably turn back money in October, unless they, in 2 months wildly present a plan to do, massive overhaul inside the fire department. So right now we're not anticipating that. We need to just get them on the ground and know what's ahead of them, and then make a collaborative plan to get us through the next 2 years, the next 5 years, and then the next 10.
Okay.
So Becca, the equipment line is reduced
Yeah.
by 94. So you want to tell them that's a free cash item, and you can tell them what's in that?
Oh gosh, tell them what's in it.
Yeah, well, it's in your warrant. I can tell you what's in it. Hold on.
Yeah. It's a bunch of equipment, turnout gear, things that are replaced. This is one of the things that got scrapped from the budget when we were looking for reductions, and it is in an article in the annual warrant.
Yeah, it's under Article 18. So there's the Her Strong Arm Tool, Leica Draws a Life, the Ripple Draw Hydraulics Tool, turnout gear, boots, pages, thermal imager camera. So that's what that's what it represents. We'll cover that later, but I wanted to make sure you knew what that swing was.
Got it.
All right, so I'm going to try to keep moving through this quickly. School department, 1.458, that's 3.99%. This is about a $52,000 reduction from what their initial balanced appropriation was back in February before COVID. This number will change if the override does pass, but 3.99% is where the school department's at right now.
Got it.
Highway expenses, this is a big number. Like Tim mentioned before, this is the reduction for the public works projects, which are things that can be covered by Chapter 90, and the tree work was reduced out of the budget as well, and that will be covered by what we have left in the existing warrant article for tree work. Street lighting. This is as a result of the work of our LED lights. So this is exciting. Hopefully this number is even higher than this, but this is probably a conservative estimate in terms of savings. Once all those lights are up and running for a few months, we'll have a much better idea of what the real cost savings is there.
And then we can make that available in October for something else if we needed to.
Got it.
I'm just going to try to find this. Here's the recreation. This is the new table. So like I said, these numbers kind of got flipped around a little bit as a result of the lack of beach and programming for the summer. So as you can see, this line has a real big jump here. The it's not, it is going up 186% because we're moving about $75,000 that would have gone into personnel into expenses so that they can do the commission and the director can do some infrastructure changes, and we can utilize those personnel dollars that would have gone towards running the beach programs for the year.
So would any of that be capital? It's just want to make sure we're not using operational funds for capital. Is that something that's been continuing what they're actually planning on doing?
You could make a case either way, but because of the unique situation of where we're at, I mean, you could reduce the operating budget and put it into capital, right? And go through that process of funding those things. But since she hasn't made up, there's a laundry list of things that can be done for improvements to the 8 parks we have.
Yeah.
So, it's not going to be the strict definition 5,000 5 years or 10,000 5 years. So, until we know what they are, it's difficult to say. My guess is there's going to be a lot of small things, from changing chains on swings to changing seats on swings to putting down rubberized surfaces around the poles.
Yeah.
It will
Okay.
cost more money than, the $5,000 threshold or the $10,000 threshold, but we just don't know what that plan is yet. Because we just made this decision today to say, hey, let's focus on these things that we know are deficient because things are 55 years old because they were donated by the Legion or whoever. Let's go fix those.
Sure. I guess I don't know. It just sorry. This is kind of the first time I've seen that part of the budget. It seems a little bit unusual, I guess. So we've obviously never had this type of scenario again. But so we're taking operational funds, putting them towards kind of maintenance, capital-y sort of things. But then we're also moving kind of fire equipment into a warrant article. Couldn't you use some of that reduction in the rec personnel and pay for instead of moving it out to an article and then having a clot back to the budget later on, pay for the fire equipment that way?
Yeah, it's general fund money in my mind. You can do it that way. It's 6 one, half dozen of the other. I don't know. And next year, if you reduce our budget, right? So you're here, you see that 13.1% increase, but we take that money out and it's now a 15% decrease. But next year we get to level service, but you're not here and somebody sees a 30% increase. They go, what happened? And they go, oh, well, we had the money, we cut it, we put it here to offset fire. And then we use free cash to do these capital things. I think it's a tougher explanation. It keeps the line, that money kind of always stays there because it's a programmatic thing, because you're going to have a huge swing in 22 because you're going to put that money back in if you take it out now.
Yeah. Dan.
You could do it either way. You really could. I just thought simplicity, and since the budget's already the one.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think through it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
I just think if there's a tougher explanation next year, that's not great, but I don't feel like that justifies how we spend this year, simply how easy or difficult it's going to be to explain next year. So I understand that it's going to be more complex to explain next year if we do it that way, but I don't feel like that should really be a factor in the decision.
All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Let's move on.
All right.
To cover debt though, Becca, would you? Because we did the short-term borrowing for the library. We had an adjustment there. Not that it impacts the general fund in any way because it's excluded debt. I think it's just important to note that there was a savings to the taxpayer by doing what we did, and I think we should share that with people.
Becca, I'm so happy you're presenting.
Well, I'm sorry, Tim, you want me to, is there something specific you want me to show?
When you originally created the debt service for expenses and retirement, we were going to permanently finance half of the library for our portion. We
Yeah.
decided to forgo that and do a short-term borrowing, getting 0.86%.
Right.
So
Yeah.
our interest costs went down, which helps the taxpayer. I want to talk
Oh,
about the difference in the two numbers.
Oh,
You might have to find another document, the original budget document.
I don't have, I have to.
That's all right. You can just, I think you just explained it, Tim. I don't know if we necessarily need to see the document, but yeah, so you can just talk through that strategy. I thought that was a great, it was a great kind of very opportunistic move to save some money. It's good.
All
Well,
right.
we're worried about the bond market. Everybody says, oh, well, they're lending money at a discount, not the municipal markets, and not even the municipal bond market by Standard & Poor's standards was, downgraded as a whole. So to get on the call and have a conversation, reliving the downturned economy in 2008, 2009 with the same people I had a conversation with 10 years ago about financing the high school project. It was nice. They welcomed the fact that someone had lived through that same crisis with them, going through a borrowing and so forth. So keeping and maintaining the AA+ affirmed was a good thing, and it obviously benefited us with the people we had bid at the interest rates they bid it on for that short-term borrowing. But I don't know what the number is. I mean, I celebrate for a couple minutes and then I move on. So
All right.
Are we ready?
You can skip it.
Okay. I can get the committees those numbers. I don't have them handy right now. I'm sorry. I think, are we ready to move on to the contingent budget? If that's.
We are. Is everybody good with that? Yes. Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Tim, do you want to talk about this? Or is he frozen?
Let's see. It's unmuted.
Yes, I'm muted. I apologize.
Yep, no worries.
So, as you all know, we looked at a joint meeting deciding what the number should be for an override. So in 14, we created a contingent budget just like we did here. If the override were to pass, we would use money for operations for town and school. After we made the decision of the $4 million for public safety and capital and for the school department, we hit COVID. And obviously you just saw me go through the whole iteration of cutting 617, 599. So basically what this does, and there's detail here that we can get into in a second, is just restore that full amount plus 214, 215 for the school department to bring them up over their 399 original appropriation back to 4.7 million, which is, I don't know, Becca, what is that for? 1.65 million?
Oh, goodness. 1.
It has to be because it's 1.5. So yeah, it's 169.
Yeah, quick math.
1.7.
Okay.
So if we use that 800 and change from the override, we're always going to have an increased tax cost. The average single family taxpayer is going to pay more in fiscal 21. Every year that happens. So if we use an additional 800 from the now grown levy by 4 million, it would cost an additional $128 to the average single family house. So what's in there, and one thing that we haven't vetted through the board or even through finance committee, is the capital plan for that 800,000. We're going to have our capital plan, which is in a subsequent budget under here, and it's balanced and it's using free cash. We don't anticipate leveraging that 800,000 should the override pass, because we haven't had any discussion about how that 800,000 is to be deployed. So it's not in our proposal anywhere to use that or appropriate that 800,000. But we will use 8 and change to balance fiscal 21, given the reduction of revenue from COVID-19.
So was there ever going to be a plan put together for the 800 in capital? It just seems weird that we would have put it on the, ballot without a plan. Was it always the intention we were going to kick that in later, or?
No, I think what happened is we decided in very short order, right, to do 4 million with 800,000 for capital. Then COVID hit, and then the nation was looking at 20% unemployment. We're certainly way below that, but we were worried about the fiscal health of our residents being able to make payments of their taxes, which we have not thankfully had to bear that problem just yet, thank God. But to put that on, we have a list, you can just assign the money to them and do whichever ones you want. We haven't got there with any committee yet, so
Sure.
we didn't want to, just say, we're going to do this with the 800,000 and then.
Yeah, of course. So have you kind of had a temperature check with the select board?
In terms of the.
Yeah, just like, do we want to appropriate, if we were to get an override, do we want to appropriate this money specifically for the capital or not? Like,
Right now in this whole scenario, having town meeting on the 23rd or the 20th, excuse me, there is no mechanism in which to raise it. I would recommend to the board and to you that from July to September, if it passes, you go, all right, well, let's use this 800,000 on these capital items that we have the list for, and then go in October with the warrant article allocating that 800,000.
okay.
So the detail inside restoring all those things, we can cover that, Becca. We had a nice slide for the board. So we'll just tell you what would be restored under this. So this is the draft motion that we have. And a lot of the stuff we talked about at 2 different meetings, and we haven't shared it in detail with the finance committee. But basically the reserve fund, we didn't talk about this in the original one, but to balance just over the historic use of the reserve fund, it's about 75 grand. I don't know if Anita has that number on this call or not in terms of what the annual reductions or uses of that fund have been. We can come back to that, but we restore that. That's 25,000. The small GIS, MIS, mapping overlay, things we do with AppGeo would be a $2,000 restoration.
I'm gonna just tell you that just for 1 second, while we're talking about the reserve fund. So, are we expecting a request? I know you mentioned that the costs, like the audiovisual costs for town meeting, ultimately would be reimbursed. We had mentioned on one of our calls about town meeting that you might be coming to us with a request to reimburse that for this year. Is that still the expectation?
I think it's my third rail, if you will. I mean, I don't want to
Okay.
ask, and I don't think I'm going to ask because I think I'm going to get it covered through the CARES Act. Becca, did you make this, some of those COVID transfers in Article 1 of the special that you anticipated? So I don't know if you can do this quickly. Do you think there's an amount that's in there that I would have gone to finance committee for that I would not have to go for?
No, the one that I think we were considering for finance committee was the town meeting cost. And, Tim and I haven't talked about it in super great detail yet, but I do think that it will probably be a request that's made sort of as a fail-safe, just like we're doing with the other adjustments. We're pretty confident we're going to be able to get it covered with the CARES Act money, but it's really a question of timing. They haven't given us a lot of indication on when we'll get the funds. The whole process has just been a little bit bumpy because it's kind of happened so quickly through the government. So we'll probably will make that request just as a fail-safe. In the event that if come June 30, for whatever reason, the funds haven't come through, we want to be balanced and we want to make sure that we can cover those costs for that, whatever that time gap is.
Okay. All right. And fine. So I just wanted to give kind of the committee a heads up on that. And obviously we've got a lot to do over the next couple of weeks. So we'll add that one to the pile, I guess. So that's about 21 grand, I understood at this point.
Yeah, that's just for the company that can do the chairs, the staging, the tent, the AV, the broadcasting, the 2 rooms, and those are and a wall projector so people can actually see any presentations that might be made.
Does it get any more expensive if it's on the rain date or the second rain date?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've asked that.
Okay. I'll be interested.
It's certainly not going to go down, but I modulate a piece. After I called him, I say, "Hey, you missed this." He's like, "Oh, we'll throw that in." I don't know what that would really cost, but I'll work on that.
All right. Yeah, if you could just when you kind of figure it out, just give us a heads up on what we should expect. Yeah. Okay. So you can move on to the police department.
Police department expenses, we look to restore that. It's 12,000. the chief's on. If you know, obviously we cut him. We didn't even, have him discuss it. But to restore it, he can tell you what he would get back, or Becca can if he doesn't want to chime in. Fire department, both those pieces, expenses and equipment, 104.4, so it's fairly significant, would be restored. And those items, stabilization, to be correct, would not be used if the contingent budget were to pass and if the override were to pass. The library expenses, 11,000 would be restored. Finance committee, small numbers here for 112. Assessors, this is the growth thing, I think, for personnel, and it may be uncomfortable, but we're going to cover it in terms of, getting qualified folks to do the work and to pay them competitively. To me, the $3,100 is well worth it in terms of the performance, as it is with every line item here. But to chop that up over 2 or 3 years, I never really get ahead. I never really get them to be competitive because I'm always behind because I never made that initial investment. So that's what that 3146 is. And then the town clerk at 10.5, this is a huge increase. And the reason for this is there's been, 2 elections and 1 assistant stepping up as the town clerk in the past, with Candy from being assistant under Donna, and then Donna leaving and Candy assuming that role, being appointed by the board, and then running again at a number that isn't requisite with the rest of the market. So we had looked at surrounding communities, both based on population and the ones that physically touch us. And I'm going to get this wrong, Becca. You got a spreadsheet on it though, but it was 68,000 was the average. I might get that wrong. Do you recall that, Becca?
I thought it was 70 or 71, maybe. I have the spreadsheet. I have to find it.
So you guys went through this discussion the other night. I think it was 72.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds 70, 72, yeah.
So that's in that 10.5. And obviously a lot of responsibility these days relative to the elections and town meeting. I don't know, put a lot of trust in her to get it done. And she's risen to the occasion, so that's what we're looking at there. Planning personnel, that 30,000, I think that's the assistant town planner. No, I'm sorry, that's the economic development coordinator, correct?
Yes.
All right, so that's that one. Building inspector, small amount, 943. Highway, 19. There's really, Becca, are there any detail? Oh, the library one is important. Cover that 4105.
Dan Gale, can you mute yourself?
I might need to talk in about 2 minutes on this.
All right, I'm going to mute you, Dan.
So Becca,
ahead.
you want to cover the library one because you made adjustments to this as of yesterday?
Yeah, today, yeah. So there's, from the last version of the contingent budget that the FinCom has seen, there's a bit of a reduction here, particularly in the library personnel line. Those 2 people that we were initially planning to bring on board for the last few months of next fiscal when the library opens, given some of the construction timelines that have moved around, and overall, budget constraints this year, the library director has recommended that we move forward with hiring those positions in FY22. So we're going to hold off on them for the tail end of FY21. So that $10,000 to $12,000 reduction from the previous version of the contingent budget that you have, that's what that reduction is. So that 4,100 just reflects some of the personnel changes that were recommended by the library director for folks who have, gotten certifications, taken on additional duties, people that we wanted to try to, reflect change in their duties with their pay. We want to restore that money if the override does pass to get those people those additional dollars for that shift in scheduling or shift in work.
Becca, not to put too fine a point on it, but those library folks have recently been credentialed. And I think that's what drives a lot of those recognitions of those certifications. Is that correct?
Yeah, credentialing, I'm not, like the MLS credential, I'm not gonna do this justice, but it's a big deal. I know that much.
Well,
And,
let's let Beth, on. If Beth,
oh, yeah, Beth is here.
if Beth wants to cover that. that'd be-
Galloway, library director. So we have a paralibrarian. She has a master's in divinity and has been working with the library for 15 years, but she took additional certification, not a master's level, but paralibrarian 1 certification. There's 4 steps. Marilyn Wilcox. So we asked, when we had suggested a 3% raise, we asked if we could get an extra 1% for her if she got that certification, and she achieved it. The other person, Eileen LeBlanc, started out at the library before my time as an assistant to the cataloger, and then went on to take on all of the mailroom duties, all of the accounting duties, learned SoftWrite, and has basically been functioning as a chief financial officer for the library, working with budget and invoices and all of that. So we asked for a raise for her as well.
Got it.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
That was much better than whatever I was babbling
Well,
about.
well articulated.
Yeah.
Well, I should probably not ask this follow-up question, but I just want to make sure that Beth, the 4105 is indicative of those increases really across those 3 folks you just mentioned, plus the minimum base of 2% for those other rank and file.
Yeah, so instead of 2%, Marilyn would hopefully get 4%. And Eileen LeBlanc, instead of, I think, 2 to 3%, would get up to 10%. She has been doing this additional job for several years now, and she had asked me to put in for an additional amount of money for her last year, and I completely did not do it. And I'm trying to sort of make up for that.
You can blame me, unfortunately.
Oh, it was all Tim's fault. So we did try to get all of the master degree staff a few years ago. We did that 3-year stepped raise process, and she was not included in that because she did not have a master's degree, but she is doing master's level work.
Okay, thanks.
Beth, thank you for reminding me of that process we went through, because I forgot. I knew it was you, but I also knew it was other folks.
Yeah, it was probably all the full-time staff.
All right, thank you.
They're very appreciative. Thank you all.
So Becca, round this out for us in terms of the 214.
Yeah, okay. So recreation, again, that's a personnel, an increase for the rec director, who we also put on, I think, a 3-year plan. This was slated to be year 2, that she would get an increase above 2%. That 710 reflects the increase above 2% that was previously agreed on, but was reduced out of the budget when we had to make a number of reductions to balance. And then the school department's 52,000 that they did reduce as a result of COVID is in here. Total budget reductions, 413, 328. This is the dollar figure for the school department, the additional funds that they've requested for FY21. And then the dollars that we will have to fund with stabilization in order to balance in 21. So all 3 of these numbers together is a total of 818, 869. So that is what we are proposing and recommending be raised in the first year of the override.
Got it. Okay, questions from the committee? Go ahead, Colleen.
So I just have a couple questions, starting with the fire equipment. You guys have it here as 102, but in the budget we just reviewed previously, it was 94. So where's the difference there?
94 is the reduction from the previous fiscal year. So we funded some amount in FY20, and the difference in those 2 numbers was 90. So we must have funded 94,000 because they're getting 0. So $94,000 less than FY20. Well, if I just show it, I think it'll be easier. Fire. So so in FY20, 94,490. We requested 102, but we funded at 0. So that's a difference of 94,490 from FY20.
Okay. And I guess my other question for the police and fire, they're on warrant articles as well. So why are they being included in the contingency budget exactly?
Yeah, so we talked about this a little bit. I think it kind of goes back to we're trying to adhere to as much as possible the philosophy around not funding operating expenses with one-time money. It does appear that we're funding in two places, but what would happen is those dollars in those warrant articles would be freed up to be transferred to other projects if the override were to pass and we were to fund this. That money can be reallocated in October, or it can be reallocated next May when we go to do the capital plan again. So we'll have, a few opportunities during the year to reallocate that money should we choose to raise it with the override funds.
Okay. Are you guys considering reducing this contingency budget in any way, like the highway, for example? You guys have said Chapter 90 money is available, and that 50,000 from the tree fund wouldn't impact anything. And since we're trying to tighten our belts as much as possible, wouldn't it make sense to remove that 150 completely?
No, I don't think so. I think that using Chapter 90, we've had an internal operating procedure with the board and staff relative to using the Chapter 90 money. The goal for that was to do plan designs for road projects that the road stabilization account would do. So in the off season, we would use Chapter 90 for that. And I think we've done that pretty well. And the Main Street project. So we have money that's in Chapter 90, it's slated for projects that we can always move and have flexibility. So that's why we would look to go there, but it will take away from other things that we would have otherwise planned to do. The trees, there are a lot of trees. If Paul's on this call, he can talk about the number of trees that have to be replaced. The 200 grand, depending on the diameter of a tree, can be gone, in a month. Thankfully, we only have a short window in which to, we've had a pretty good spring, and if we go into fall, we could spend a lot of money taking trees that are dead down and replacing those trees. So we could spend even the money we're reallocating here between the 250, which we have in the article, 200 in the article, and 50 here. We can get through it, and especially if we have a good or bad spring, winter season, gypsy moths, insects, bugs. Paul, you know all this stuff, so chime in terms of, we haven't identified every tree, but.
Can I just stop you right there? Because previously, a few weeks ago, when Becca presented this to the select board, she said that the $100,000 that could be used for Chapter 90 money, it would not affect any projects. It would just be a more tedious process to fill out the application. But tonight, you're saying it will affect projects. So I just want to be clear, which is it?
Yeah, it will. It will. There are, for example, there's a $10 million project in South Grafton that when we started this design engineering piece with VHB, it was a $3.8 million project. So that has skyrocketed. And every time you look at costs for engineering services, it's generally 10% of the cost. Ours will not be 10% because we've been working closely with VHB. But if those costs went off the rails, or if all of those takings we have to do and the appraisals, those are all Chapter 90 slated things. Thankfully, we get an allocation every year of Chapter 90. It's been consistent at $540,000 a year. The wrinkle there is next year, because Chapter 90 is based on gas tax, if people drive less, there'll be less tax collected. Therefore, we'll get less. So that's a little bit of the worry and trepidation, because there will be less money to do those type of internal projects with, because we'll be doing it with general operation money. And I would further, just in 2014, we did the 1.5 million stabilization because we had a $17 million backlog of roads. This maintenance line in the DPW highway budget is to continue that ongoing maintenance. So I don't want anybody to feel that they voted for 1.5, but then got shortchanged because we kind of moved money out. It was already programmed for road improvements to keep our head above water. I just don't feel it's a good model. If we had to do it, we have to do it. But if we don't have to do it, we should not do it.
So just from a kind of a philosophical standpoint, it seems like we're just restoring back everything from the pre-COVID budget if we get an override, right? That's basically the intention.
Yes.
From a an optic standpoint and the message that we're sending to people that are considering voting for an override, to me at least, that seems a little bit tone deaf in the sense that it's not pre-COVID, it's post-COVID. So our revenue has changed substantially and it will continue to change. You mentioned a couple of things. So that Chapter 90 will drop. There's going to be significant issues with on the school side, obviously with Chapter 70 and some of the grants and all the other stuff that they're dealing with. There was a very clear message that was articulated, I think, by Finance Committee as we were going through these two budgets, just as in a committee meeting last week, that we should be showing some significant fiscal constraint in the contingency budget to signal to the town that we understand that things have changed and we're making adjustments and changes based on that to recognize that things have changed and also to try to preserve as much of the original intention of the override as it was proposed and get back to being able to fund more things on that side than just compensating for COVID-19 impacts, I guess. So we have the schools, and I think we need to move on to that discussion. But I just wanted to let you know that that is the kind of the mood of the Finance Committee, and there may be a will to bring some changes to town meeting to have town meeting be able to consider. So we can take this offline, but we may very well come with some adjustments. So I want to make sure that at town meeting, we have an opportunity to present something to town meeting, which would represent some changes, particularly to the contingent budget, to give them an option to consider something that's a little bit more restrained.
So Matt, I got two follow-up questions. You said Chapter 90 grants and other things for the school. Becca,
Chapter 70.
Yeah, Chapter 70, it's part of my overall revenue reduction post-COVID. So Becca, what was the reduction from state aid if I level funded that?
For combined general government and Chapter 70, it was about $200,000.
Okay.
So, but that's not what the schools. So we'll talk to the schools next, but that's not what they're signaling to us at this point. And I'm looking at what's happening at all the towns around us, and they're all planning on 10 to 15% reductions in state aid for the schools. And so it's happening in all the communities around us, and everybody that I'm talking to are all planning on that. And I talked to Jay over the weekend, and he said their scenario is 2 to 10% cut. So it's not level funded. They're actually anticipating some reductions. So we have some significant concerns about that. I think if it's okay with the committee, I'd like to move on to talking to the schools, but I just wanted to, so we can have a quick follow-up discussion, Tim, if you want. But I do want to soon move on to having a discussion with the schools.
Yeah, that's fine. I just didn't want you to double count the number. I'm in communication with every town manager in Worcester County. We've all talked about this, and they're level funding state aid to get through this town meeting. Can it be worse in 2021? Certainly, but no one from the state has signaled that it will be anything worse than level funded. Unless you guys have heard something I haven't heard. And I talk to those town managers on a twice a week basis.
I'm just basing it on discussions I've had with Jay and discussions that I've seen in the school committee context. So
Okay.
I'm taking my signals from them, but we'll talk to them next. It may not be the concern that I think it is. I'm just seeing, what's happening with all the school districts around us, and they're all planning on that 10%. And as a matter of fact, many of them are given notices to people, so they're already doing those reductions in forces to prepare for it. And hopefully additional money comes in. We just don't know. But from a planning standpoint, I think we're going to have potentially some significant challenges. So I want to make sure that we're going into this eyes wide open, really. And from a messaging standpoint, that we're really delivering the right message, that if we get the override money, that we're going to be really taking care of it and appropriating it well and conservatively, because there are a lot of unknowns. So that's all I had to say on that.
So you'll be sure to give me the adjustments you would look to make to this contingent budget?
Yes, we would have to obviously work with you to make sure that those numbers were exactly right. Because obviously what I wouldn't want to do is to have to, you have a moving target. That sounds like you have a moving target probably right up to town meeting. And what I don't want to do is to get to town meeting, to have finance committee have something for the town meeting to consider and to not have it all balanced out to the dollar. So we need to set that up, Tim. And I guess that's what I'm telling you, is if the committee decides to move forward with that, we need to make sure that it's well coordinated so that it's something that's simple and very straightforward from a mechanical standpoint and approving or, do we hold the whole budget? It's just not something that I've ever been through. So I want to be very clear on what the process is. So we'll definitely work with you and obviously the moderator to make sure that, that if we decide to move forward with that process, that it's going to be smooth.
So has the budget that we talked to Jay about in January, February was based on a December document that's online. Is there a new budget for the school district now?
I don't know, to be honest. That's why we got Jay in next. I really don't know.
I know you're working on it. I just didn't know if there was something new that I hadn't seen relative to your statement about the reduction in Chapter 70.
I haven't seen anything, Tim, and that's why we're so keen to bring him in and talk to him, because we just haven't seen anything. They're dealing with the same struggles as everybody else in town. So, but I have heard very clearly that they're expecting additional reductions and that they're not expecting that level of funding.
Okay.
But I just haven't had that. I have not seen a single document on it. It's been just a verbal discussion and some emails that we've been back and forth on. I'm just looking at what's happening with all the towns around us, and I would be surprised if Grafton wasn't going to be similarly impacted. I wanted to give any of the department heads an opportunity to say anything if they wanted to speak to the committee. We appreciate you guys sitting through this whole thing tonight. This was really useful, Tim and Becca. I appreciate it. And I thank everybody for sitting in.
We have 22 more articles. So you're going to try and go through them all, or?
Can we go through them quickly? Let's see. Why don't you guys, let's see, we need to get numbers on some of these. So I think at this point, just hang on a second, Barry. Do we have anything that we need the department heads for?
Yeah, I think Chris McGoldrick is an essential point in the zoning change for 27 Upton and for the availability to sell that parcel. So that's why he's here.
Okay. Why don't we do it on that basis? If we've got anybody here who are department heads that want to talk through their articles, then let's do those next. And then we can let the department heads go and do it based on that.
And then Jen as well, relative to the Super Park articles and so forth. So there's some CPC related stuff. So Chris, you want to talk about 27 Upton? We had Horsley and Whitney come in. We got a grant. You can just run us through that real quick.
Yeah, so I am having a little bit of a spotty internet tonight, so bear with me if it's kind of breaking up. But yeah, 27 Upton Street, we're looking at the sale of the property and as well as disposal of the property. Horsley Witten came in and did some zoning updates that are being proposed. Mainly that's looking at, in kind of brief context, it's looking at implementing the mixed use zoning that we've used in other areas. It's been very successful in attracting new development. So we see that as a value added and modernization of the standards that will make that parcel more attractive and hopefully bring in a better value as well as a better end product. So The planning board process has been reviewing that, and they've come, Horsley Witten has provided us with a lot of kind of reference material in that regard. So that's the kind of basic gist of it, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions you guys might have.
So Chris, I'm just going to add on to that, and I'll just be quick about it. It's the same process we use for 8 Pine. You know, we modified the zoning up there. We entered into sales partnership. That's the only real difference between this, because we own this. But to have this as a gateway project, it'll have a mixed use component for housing and for commercial use from Upton, and then leaving Grafton to go to Upton. I think there's a huge potential to rezone all those parcels that are from the salt shed down to the barn and everything in between. So the post office is in the mix. The 2 residential split family, 2-family that's right there. Just because you change the zone doesn't mean that the use has to stop. People can
Sure.
still live there. I think at the end of the day, we just increase the value for all of the property to be maybe developed all at once if people are so inclined, or we can just develop our parcels that we own, and those other parcels can go and do what they want later on with more opportunity than just being R40. So anything, obviously, it's on the tax rolls is better than what's not on the tax rolls, and obviously the look of that site is not very attractive. So that's what we want to complement. The fire station across the street, the library that's being invested heavily in. We want to have this, but without burden to the taxpayer to get it, generating revenue and sell the parcel for a mixed use development.
That's interesting. So you're actually providing an opportunity for somebody to come in and sort of do a larger acquisition to make essentially have a much better opportunity to make something more substantial, I guess, across that whole area. It's great.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. I don't want to miss it. And I don't want to miss the Pine Street one. Is just a lot of small pockets of opportunity from the Bolac Plaza on through. So, you know, this is one we can control, and we can get it out. We can hit the market quick, and hopefully people will buy into this concept. So those are the 2. So thank you, Chris. You did a great job with that.
I just wanted to mention, as you noted, it makes the property, you know, the zone being including all those properties, that could be a larger acquisition, but it also upzones them individually. You know, as Tim noted, it's not going to zone out the existing uses, but it just allows for those to be the highest and best use and attract that.
Got it. Thanks. Any additional questions on this one? Excellent. So Chris, you can take off if you'd like. You're welcome to stay if you really want to watch the rest of it.
So Becca, we were going to put together a list and kind of tie people to different articles, but the cable budget's pretty self-explanatory, right? We have franchise fees that cover these costs. So that's fairly straightforward. So we have Bob and Bob on. If they want to cover any details, or if the committee has any questions for this particular article, they're here now for you to answer those questions. The debt service is part of our debt service, but we use their funds to pay that debt service, even though we pledge the full faith and credit of the community and of the tax base. Those franchise fees pay for the upgrade to that building for putting Cable Studio on this campus in the old police station.
Any questions on that? Moving on.
So if you have particulars about about capital, and this is probably, Becca, if you pull up the sheet, the people who are responsible for those capital items should talk about why they're important. So, you know, the wiring at this building from 1957 or 53, you know, is original. It's unsafe. You know, we want to preserve the building. We want to invest in the asset. Bob should talk about that and other things that are in the capital plan for 21. People who are directly responsible for those projects should talk about it. So once you pull that up, we can
Yeah, so
talk about it.
PDF is being a little glitchy. Oh, there you go. Yeah. I know you love when things end like this.
Does anybody want me to talk about the wiring in the municipal center?
Well, let's just kind of go in order. Let's go through let's go through the live scan thing so we all know what that is. Chief?
I don't think the chief's on, actually.
Crapo left us?
No, I'm here.
I didn't
sorry.
think he'd be gone. Chief, you can feel free to talk about how you're trying to get an earmark for this as well through the state legislature, but right now slating to use free cash. But if we were to get the earmark, we wouldn't have to use free cash.
Yeah, that's correct. We're talking about the cross-match live scan. Basically, we discussed this, discussed with Sue and Matt and Dan a while back. Just basically, the live scan that we have right now is a single print scanner. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. It's a single print scanner. The FBI, a couple of years after we got the single print, decided they want to do what they call a palm print, which covers all the hands based on new technology. We'd like to replace ours, which is, they have a useful life about 5 to 7 years. Ours is passing that mark. So eventually we're going to get notice that they're not supporting the software for it anymore. And we like to plan ahead to get this purchased. This is what we use to do all our gun checks with. Anybody that comes in that's fingerprinted, this goes automatically. It's not like the old cards and ink that we used to have. This goes out to NCIC, National Crime Information Center, FBI, and what's nice is we get instantaneous records checks back once this goes out. Naturally, the better the software, the better functioning we have with this capability, and we don't let the wrong people go, and we don't charge the wrong people if they give us a false name or something like that. So we're looking to replace this under the capital plan. If there is, I've been looking out for grants. There hasn't been anything for the cross match. And if we do get an earmark, as Tim said, mentioned through the state, which I was told is pretty doubtful now with the way the funding is for the state with the COVID-19. But we are looking out for grants. If we can get it before we purchase this, we'll be using that. But until then, the plan is to use capital money.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks.
So Matt, you want me to just have Paul talk about these next three?
Yep, please.
All right, go ahead, Paul, if you can, if you're there.
Oh, I'm here. So again, truck 47, it's one of the one-ton dumps we use them obviously every day. It's got 120,000 miles on it now. If this gets approved and we order it, we'd get the truck in probably a year, so it'll be 15 years old and probably 130-something thousand miles. The salt takes a toll on them, and they say they're used every day. That's the need for that. Truck 44 is one of the larger trucks, the Mack trucks, which is actually a 2005 International. That again, if we, the truck we got the grant for this year, it's, they take almost a year to get the truck from the time you order it. So again, it's going to have to see one more winter. Just for example, that truck, the power steering pump literally fell off this past winter, just rotted off the frame. It's just, they take a beating, hopefully with the new facility. The idea is we can keep them cleaner, keep them housed inside, and we should get a lot more longevity out of them. And we've also started buying them, trucks with some stainless steel parts. And then the cemetery truck is just the same idea. It's used every day. It's got 120,000 miles on it now. And that truck's going to have a plow and a lift gate, just they need the lift gate for stones in their work.
Does everybody on the committee, you probably know this, so perpetual care, if we get money when we sell lots for the library, for the cemetery, and we retain some of that for perpetual care, and that's a funding source to replace this truck.
I didn't know that, actually. It's good.
So Becca, can you, not Becca, sorry, sewer department retained earnings for the F-250. These are more off the rack though, right, Paul? For the 45,000, you can just buy those. All right, and everybody knows retained earnings for the sewer department, but if people watching don't know, they have a separate enterprise account that turns back money in excess of their expenses, and that's what generates their retained earnings. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right, we'll have Berger talk about the general government ones. Well, at least the first one.
Please.
Okay, I can't see that screen anymore, but the wiring in the municipal center is cloth covered with rubber insulation, put in 1950. Over the years, the rubber gets old, deteriorates, and the only thing that holds it in place is the cloth covering. The circuit breakers are the original circuit breakers that were installed in 1954 or 53. It's time to start thinking about upgrading. So I put together a couple scenarios, and we need for phase one, $50,000 to start, and then another $50,000 to complete that phase one. And what that is we take the main feeders that go out of the maintenance room with 500 to 700 thousandths cable. That's pretty big cable, runs in the basement, and it feeds a couple panels located on the first floor and second floor. So we refeed the panels, we change the panels, and that's phase one. And we want to do this a couple times, but we're gonna start with that side of the building first.
Who are we using to do the work?
Say that one more time, please.
I'm wondering who we're using to do the work.
We're gonna go off this the state bid list, and we had DMH is one of our contractors, and he came out and gave us one price.
Got it. Did we get any competitive prices on that?
Well, when you go to the state bid list, yeah, we're gonna get 3 quotes. Nothing is signed right now, but when you do go to the state bid list, they're basically all supposed to be in the same ballpark. But we will be pricing this out to go out to bid because it's over $100,000.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, can you do the Dell server and then the Council on Aging Van Barbara, if she's still on, she can do that one?
Yeah, sure. Real quick, the Dell server, probably 3 years ago, one of our main servers went down unexpectedly. We didn't have the cash on hand up front to purchase a new server outright, so we did a lease purchase. 10-8, it's in the capital plan now. There are 2 years left. Is that right? Yeah, 2 years left on this lease. So it'll be in 21 and in 22. That's it. Barbara wants to talk about the van. That would be good.
Sure. So we're looking to replace our 2013 14 passenger van with a 2021. The cost would be roughly $62,000. We're looking to go with Atlantic Turtle Top in South Grafton, so we want to keep the business local. The senior center provides, for FY19, they provided 7,916 rides. For FY18, they provided 6,250 rides. So every year, our transportation ridership has increased significantly. On our current 2013 van, we've had to replace the exhaust, the brakes, and the rotors and the radiator. So it's time. We replaced our 2006 van. It had 120,000 miles on it. And currently our 2013 van has 118,000 miles on it. The good news is that we currently, through grants and donations, currently have $20,000 to go towards the cost of the van. And Atlantic Turtle Top will give us $6,000 for our current van. So $26,000 could go for the new van. And that's all.
So just to clarify, on that little piece at the end that Barbara stated, the funds that they have now and whatever more they can raise in advance of this purchase, those funds will go unspent. And again, those dollars will be available the following year to either reallocate or transfer for other projects, whatever's not spent.
Got it. So those would be subtracted from the 62 and just not spent.
Correct.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Welcome.
And the rest of the projects are school projects, which I'm sure they can elaborate on if you guys have questions. So let's go back real quick. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me find my. All right. I'm just going to fly through these. Article 9, transportation. This is to, I'm sorry about my dogs.
Yeah, I'll do it, Becca. I'll do it. So transportation bond bill, this is the money we get every year from Chapter 90. It's about 500,000. We did get a commitment letter from them. I think we'll get the amount that they've guaranteed us in that letter. But, you know, I have some worrying staff, and rightly so, but we have to wait and see. We just don't know. We'll allocate what we have. If it comes in lower, we'll go back in October and make an adjustment to this article. And then the next one is just to allow the board to enter into agreements to spend that same money.
Yep.
And then these are the authorized limits for all the revolving accounts we have. It hasn't changed much. I think there's one addition. Becca's going to have to do it after the dog stops barking.
I'm sorry. My dogs were just going a little nuts for a minute. I apologize. Did you ask something?
I think we added one to this list, right? Or is this the same list as it's always been?
No, we modified the bylaw a couple of years ago when the Modernization Act came into play. But we haven't added any accounts to my knowledge that I can recall right now.
Okay, so 12, a recreation revolving account. We can let Jen talk to this, so we can have Anita talk to it. But the goal here, well, go ahead, Jen. Maybe I lost Jen. Becca?
Sure. So essentially just modifying the structure of the existing revolving account that the Recreation Department has. Small portion of the funds gets swept back to the general fund. The change in this account structure will allow those dollars to be continually used for programming. As most of you know, the Recreation Department is, a lot of their programming is pretty self-sustaining in terms of what they spend and what they bring in revenue. So this modification of the account will allow for that.
Can I, Mr. Chairman, can you allow Jen Anderson to speak? I think she's muted from you.
I didn't mute her intentionally. Let's see. Hang on 1 second. I don't think I've muted her.
I think she's, am I muted? No, I think she's in here as a viewer and not a panelist right now. I think she's just a participant.
Got it.
I'll ask you to use the link I sent to her. Or actually, the one Matt sent to her probably better. All right, because the other articles, I really need her leadership and insight on for the estimated park program.
Yep, I don't see her in as a panelist or an attendee.
All right, now I'm here. If anyone needs me.
All right.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Jen. Hi. Becca did a pretty good job of this. Do you want to elaborate if you didn't hear her relative to?
No, I didn't want to interrupt either. I mean, however I can, see fit. But yeah, I mean, this would really allow us to grow and expand our department and retain the funds from year to year, and quarter to quarter or season to season, so we can plan accordingly and use those funds to better ourselves and cover any cost of running new programs and expanding what we have for us. So it would be extremely helpful and a big part of what our department can be.
We're gonna move on. Becky, you got another one?
Yeah, I'll keep going. Fire department insurance supplement. This is established at a special town meeting in 1980s, which does allow us to pay for up to 75% of firefighters' gross pay in the event of injury. We're likely going to pass over this article. It does have money in it now. We haven't had to use it not that I know of. I don't know about you, Tim, but not since
No, it hasn't been used in a very long time. So we got to get the balance from the accountant's office, but there's probably a reason why we talked about passing over it. We just kind of added it in for that additional insurance. I think we're at a good spot now where we don't have to, at least for 1 year.
Yeah. Article 14 is a standing housekeeping article. It allows the treasurer to borrow in anticipation of revenue from time to time. Housekeeping, but it does have to be done each year. Unemployment compensation, we're going to raise $50,000, which is the number that we typically do. I know in some years it's been higher depending on what the anticipated layoffs look like. But when we first started looking at the budget, sat down with the school department and we sort of went through, this was a while ago, so we might have to go through this again. But sort of the worst case scenario and where we stood today with the balance of the unemployment. And at that time, we felt that that 50,000 added into the account would suffice. So that's what we have here.
And just so other members that might not be on so long, we fund our liability for this as we go. We don't pay the 1% tax to Department of Unemployment for insurance purposes. We pay as they go, and we don't lay a lot of people off. People leave our employ, and the way the state of Massachusetts goes is you go back to the last employer of record, even if they had another job. In terms of, I think they go back 3 employers. We try to contest things where we can and where we can win, and we have a good advocacy group in UTMC that monitors our claims, and we go to unemployment and try to fight people that we don't think are deserving, but sometimes we lose. So if we anticipate them, we budget for them, but if we don't know them, we could still have that cost, even though we tried to fight the case, if you will. So a couple pieces to that, but hopefully you got that.
Got it. Thanks.
Article 16, funding for RTA services. So this is funding that we get through RTA that supplements, allows us to provide transportation through the RTA bus for seniors in town. If people have specific questions, I would direct them to Barbara because she's the expert here. So Article 17 and 18 are the equipment pieces that were pulled out of the budget for the police and fire department. 12,000 for radios and tasers, and 102,000 for the equipment that Tim had gone through previously. The free cash balance again is a running total here at the bottom. You can see, so you can see we're at about 900,000 after Article 18.
So the process for those articles. So if guessing those are going to pass, if the contingency budget passes, then we're essentially, those would be moved to where and then made available to kind of transfer back out at fall town meeting. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so if the contingency budget were to pass and the override were to pass and we funded those items with the operating money in October, we would have an opportunity to transfer the free cash in these articles to other projects to fund more capital or other capital, or they, you know, if nothing was on the table for October or was immediate in need, we could wait until next May, and then they could be transferred towards the following fiscal year's capital plan. So it's kind of two opportunities there to move the money. It sort of depends on what's on the plate in October and if there's a need for it. And if not, we would do what we typically do when we close out articles and use that money towards the following fiscal year's capital plan.
Okay.
So Article 19 and 20, we went through those already with Chris. Article 21 is a local family approached the town several months ago now, requesting to donate about 17 acres of land at 92 North Street. They're requesting that it be held in conservation restriction for passive recreation and open space. The select board did vote to, place it on the warrant and request that the town accept the property. If the board has, the committee.
Can you talk a little bit about the, I know there was some testing done. Was that finalized, and what was the finding from that testing?
Yeah, Tim, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, so Parker Environmental did some test borings up at the site. We were worried because it was used as an orchard at one point. It's history, an orchard, so they had some pesticides. We were worried about lead was found, and the naturally occurring element in the soil, the name escapes me. Somebody will chime in with what it's called. Arsenic. Those were found at not reportable levels. Initially, just not to get too far afield, we thought they were reportable. We reported them to DEP. We did a retraction, I don't know, maybe 10 days later, because they were not the reportable levels that we had thought they were. We did that out of abundance of caution to not take a piece of land that might be contaminated. The use and the vision for this land, Jen has well in hand, has talked to Conservation and the Recreation Commission relative to preserving this land. And, we think it's going to be passive recreation, regardless of what the tests found. They're not insurmountable things to overcome if we were to build small pavilions or whatever, but we're not going to put a playground out there. It's going to be for hiking and picnicking type activities. But Jen, I'm not doing it justice in terms of the way you put it for the 17 acres. So maybe you can take a shot at it too.
Does it come with the house?
No,
it doesn't. Okay.
No house. And Leah's really been the leader and been way more involved. But there would be some restrictions on the donation regarding the fact that the family would only want passive recreation there. So active recreation would not even be an opportunity for us, which we're totally fine with. I don't know if anyone's seen the property map and the cells that were in question and the cells that were tested, but they're very easily a workaround from those. So even if we wanted to explore the walking trails or the family suggested community gardens, even at some point in the property, that we could do that. So opened up some great opportunities for that, and we would just have to make the path. We would have frontage right along North Street. The house as existing would be selling separately, along with 4 other housing lots along North Street that have already been developed. But the rest of the acreage in the 17 acres would be for us to have. So we think it's a really great opportunity, and between conservation and recreation, would really look forward to fulfilling the family's vision for the property and keeping the mothers and families' ideas and goals, see them through.
I love it. I wish more families would do that.
So Leah, I don't know if there's anything you would care to add that might help too, but Leah would probably be able to add as well.
No, I think you did a pretty good job. Thanks.
Matt,
Yes, Sue. Sorry, missed you.
Before Jen leaves, I just have a real quick question back to the budget, and I hate to do that at the last minute. But $40,000 for recreation for improving some of the other parks, what is that going to get you? I mean, you don't have any plans, so there's what, 8 or 9 parks in our town? I mean, $40,000 isn't going to go far. So what exactly do you have planned to do with that money?
Well, if you're talking about, are you talking about the 5-year capital, the 5-year plan?
No, it's the money we're gonna take out of your general fund budget for 21 by not running programs and not running the beach, using those funds to do ADA and programmatic improvements.
I think it's more than that, but yeah. So what the plan is we have the transition plan that we received, right? So we're going to rank through all that, but also thinking that I would reach out survey wise to get an idea on what parks people use the most, and trying to rank that as do we fully address a park, in full, or is it surfacing all at once, or et cetera, and there's grant opportunities too. So that could be part of it, but surfacing and accessible routes is our main goal. Our equipment and playgrounds is really all considered ADA compliant. It's just, and there's a lot of smaller ticketed items that we could do internally between DPW and Parks Department, and just meeting with them and really laying out that plan of attack regards to line marking and signage and gates and such.
Thank you.
And because we just kind of made this decision today, knowing that we can't really keep people safe and we have a revenue issue because we don't know how many people are going to attend the beach and so forth, given that we made that decision today and we announced it publicly to you all tonight, Jen hasn't had a chance to put together an itemized list, but that transition ADA study that we had funded through a grant we can cherry pick that list and do those things around those playgrounds, because they've identified all physical structures where we're deficient and we can focus in on those, and they have estimated costs associated with them. So we can take a page right out of that.
Yeah, and again, Sue, so just to confirm that number, I mean, there's a number from FY20 we're looking at, and then a number from FY21. So I wasn't sure what the conversation was, but overall, I think it's a pretty good number to be working with.
Thank you.
So would those grants augment the spending, or have we identified which grants might be available for that?
Well, we know grants exist. It's just a matter of if it needs to be town backed, or some do need to be town backed. At a town meeting, and whether we can wait on that or not, and stuff that we can address immediately with the funds we have now. And so what's the best way of prioritizing and addressing. So I'm just laying that all out and ranking the transition plan from park to park, and meeting with cemetery and what can be addressed internally, which is more than I thought, and is great. It's just a matter of staff availability. At this point, is they're getting caught up, and working out that timeline. But
got it.
Much more promising than I thought. And as well as meeting with the Grafton Little League, there's a couple items on there that would be specific to the Grafton Little League. So just working with a couple different groups and dividing and conquering the list.
Okay, thanks.
I just, this is Becca. I just want to piggyback on that thought really quick, Matt, that question. I actually just thought of this, but there's an ADA grant that kind of comes in phase 2 when you do the transition, that then dollars become available to make the upgrades that they request that you put together in your packet. We did apply for it last year. We didn't get it. This is probably a really good opportunity for us to reapply, because you're more likely to get it the more often you apply and don't get it, basically. And because we have those like matching dollars existing in the recreation budget already, there's probably actually a pretty good shot that we have. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but given that there's some money to supplement there already in the operating budget, that's definitely a grant that I would work with Jen on this coming year.
Very good.
All right, are we ready to move on?
Listen, I just want to jump in, Matt. I just want to be clear, though. We would look for those grants to augment and add to. We wouldn't look for them to directly offset. And especially if we can leverage that grant, which we got to pay for the study initially, and do more, that would be a more robust route for us to go, because they do fund at least 75%. Becca, is that they didn't do the whole study for us, but that study was pretty significant in terms of cost. And I don't think we came up with a lot of general funding.
They did do the whole study. They fund the whole study, but it's much like many other grants where if you have matched dollars in any amount that you're putting up, you're more likely to get a portion of the grant funding, like most grants, unfortunately or fortunately. But there's a very long list of projects on the ADA list, so we would definitely have to take stock of what's there and what makes the most sense. But rec is definitely, on the list, high on the list, I would say.
Got it.
All right, are we ready to move on here?
Yeah, too many more. I mean, go ahead, Beck.
No, I'm just going to try to fly through these. I know you guys have other stuff to get to. So Article 22 is acceptance of a property. This is a strip of land that was inadvertently conveyed to the original purchaser of a lot on Lottie Drive. The lot has been resold, and the new owner kind of came upon this and had approached the town and approached council and is asking to basically reconvey the strip back to the town. So no real impact here. It's been recommended to us by council that we move forward and to just get this straight on the books, so to speak. We have no surplus property that we're aware of right now for Article 23. Article 24, 25, I'm not going to speak to the CPC stuff. Obviously, there's a handful of citizens petitions in here.
We're talking about those on Wednesday.
Okay, good. I will just move right past here. Tim, did you want to talk about Super Park at all?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I wanted Jen to, just relative to the phase one, and a lot of people know this already in terms of the numbers and what CPC votes amount to. So Jen, can you take us through, and Becca, if you can bring up the slide that talks about the phase one and the 1.1 million and how the allocation of the cost estimates would go based on the study, that would be helpful. So Jen, I'm putting you on the spot again.
No problem. So we have about $241,000 remaining in existing funds, which I do have a little bit updated slide, Becca, maybe I can send you. But so just declaring what we have as existing funds, the 241 voted on at fall town meeting 2015 from the tax overlay, but asking or asked CPC, and they were sponsoring 2 different articles for funding towards this project. $250,000 they have, or that would be from their FY21 budgeted reserve, and $700,000 the town would bond and pay off from CPC funds. So what we're proposing of this park would be a 1.190 estimated costs with funding with just a little bit over that, but it will include the first phase of the playground, structures for ages 2 to 5 and 5 to 12. The parking infrastructure, which is really important in the timing of the library at this point, to align with them. The loop path and open lawn, a pavilion, and then what's considered the soft cost for design, permitting, survey, and such for that, which is really going to get us the replacement of the park we had, be able to expand who is benefiting with our new design and the multi-generational aspect that we have of this for it. And just making sure that people understand that this is what's being proposed now, and any other possible future expansion or amenities is going to be completely based on community input from outreach and what funding we have. So we have planned worked on the master plan to incorporate the possible ideas of a dog park or a sport court, or lighting on the path, or a digital walking path, additional walking paths. But that's a no at this point, and will be reached out in the future. But that we'd be laying the infrastructure for that now, and time it with the library, so we don't have to rip up what they have done as new and incur any additional costs. And really getting phenomenal park at this point, with playground that's going to accommodate. It's large, it's centralized, it's inclusive, it'd be accessible, and really meet the needs and wants of what we believe, to be many people in town. So really excited about it.
Excellent. Any other any questions from the committee? We do have CPC coming in to kind of talk about the funding element of it, so they'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, thanks.
Are we ready to move forward?
Please.
All right, Article 35, Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund. So there's a kind of a long backstory here. I'm going to try to be quick. So there was a request to purchase a brush mower this year, so that we could begin internally with our department, start mowing some of the existing conservation land that we have been using a contractor for many years. Leah can also jump in here if I misspeak, because this was a piece of the conservation budget for a long time. It was that contracted cost was reduced out of the operating budget for this coming fiscal year, FY21. Leah talked to Daryl, our superintendent of parks and cemeteries, and Paul, and they basically confirmed that with the right equipment, they can certainly continue to maintain the existing grounds with the upgraded equipment, and then also expand to utilize that equipment to keep those open, the fields that we have mowed for hiking or walking, whatever open space use. So this article is going to utilize some existing perpetual care funds to purchase that mower. The mower will be used for cemetery use. They'll use it on the existing cemeteries. We're proposing a three-way split between three existing accounts to use $12,000 from each account. The mower will be used equally throughout the cemeteries. You can see the balances before and after down here of those accounts. And that's really the long and short of it. If people have specific questions, I'm sure Leah and or Paul can probably answer.
I just want to elaborate one point and what might draw attention to the frugalness, if you will, of trying to use someone else's money to get particular work done to maintain stuff. We had a grant called a WHIP grant for a long time that Linda Detloff, if anybody remembers, Linda was in charge of and controlled to get these fields mowed with that grant. That grant went away, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Somebody else will have to confirm that. So we took that on in the general fund under conservation and did as much as we could with the monies that we had, because we had limited funding. So we didn't cut everything that needed to be cut. So now we have, much like building the fiber municipal area network, we are, using other available funds to build capacity for other work to be done that's complementary to the primary use of this mower. So it's, I don't know. I think it's something that people should just pay attention to, that we're trying to find alternate ways other than general fund revenue to pay for items that we should be taking care of. But since we have limited resources to do that, we find other ways to do it.
Just one other point of clarification on this. You recall from the capital plan, the $75,000 from perpetual care for the existing truck. The sale of lots account is separate from these three accounts. So the balance, don't be alarmed by the balances. The sale of lots account has significantly more funds in it right now than these three accounts for these individual cemeteries. I just wanted to make that point real quick.
Thank you.
36 and 37, fire hydrants, pretty standard one
Yep.
out.
Moving on.
And I think that the rest of these are citizens petitions.
Got it. Okay, we'll have the petitioners come and talk about those on Wednesday.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay, so, Sue, what do we need in terms of numbers? Sue Fiacco.
So some of these, we're going to receive a couple of new budget tables from you, Becca, within the next day or two.
Yeah, I will, as soon as I get off this evening, I will forward the updated budget table and the updated contingent budget motion to you and Matt, so you guys have that.
Okay, I didn't see the total for the, for Article 5, which is one of the ones you're going to be sending with an update, correct?
Yeah, the budget, yeah, both of those, I'll send them out. Yep.
Okay, and a list of capital, please.
Yeah, I can send the capital as well, yep.
Yes.
So that hasn't changed, has it, Becca?
No, the capital plan as it's being put forth has not changed at all, but I'll send it to you soon.
All right, yeah, we got that back in January. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I think we should move on to schools because we've had them patiently waiting. So any of the other department heads that want to, go ahead, Colleen.
I just had a quick question for Tim. On the budget, is Finance Committee still going to get a column for our recommendations or not?
Yeah, you guys talked about that. Becca, can we fit that in there?
Yeah, I can add a column. Yeah, Sue, I might get it to you tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning, then if that's okay with you. I just have to add that column, and I don't have it in the one here that I showed tonight, but I can do that quickly and get it to you at first thing in the morning.
That would be great. Thank you. We plan on going to print by Monday, the latest, June 8th.
Okay. Any other questions? Excellent. Okay. So any of the department heads that want to get going, you're welcome to stay, of course, but feel free to take off. Let's see. Irene raised her hand. Go ahead, Irene.
I think Irene is participating as an attendee, not a participant.
Go ahead, Irene. Can't seem to unmute you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I've been trying to figure out what went wrong, why I'm in as a listener, an attendee versus a participant. I've been here since 7:06.
Well, hi.
Hi, so just so you know, I've been here listening to all this. And
Thank
I
you.
have no idea.
You've been very patient.
Well, I didn't need to jump in, so there was no need, but I figure now as we move into the second portion, I'd like to at least let you guys know I'm here.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, and I got to get it straightened out for tomorrow.
Indeed. Usually it's just a link. So one's an attendee link and the other is a panelist link. So the email that you should have gotten would have the panelist link.
I don't think I got it, so let's make sure I get it for tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yes. I'll make sure. I'll go through the list. The Zoom like panelist invites are a very tedious process. You've got to invite people individually, and you can't save like a template that allows you to add the same committee from one meeting to another. So the whole thing is cut and paste from.
Okay. Yeah, because I do think you missed me, because I promise you I went through my emails like 10 times.
I believe it.
So once I realized something was wrong. But anyway, I'm here and I'll keep listening.
Excellent. Okay. Jay, I'll give you the floor.
All right. Thank you guys very much for having us tonight. I spoke to Matt on Friday. He suggested that he would provide some foundational questions to us being Dan and I. Dan, I believe, is on the call, Dan Gale. We then put those answers into a memo on Friday afternoon and sent them back to Matt. I'm hoping the FinCom has them. For tonight, we put together some slides to go over those questions and answers with the blessing of the chair. I'll share my screen, run through those slides, and as always, feel free to interrupt me. Does that sound all right, Matt?
Yep, please.
Okay.
So Jay, just before you get started, so my understanding is that from the budget that we've already reviewed together,
yep,
to the budget that we see, basically that we're at, the change in that budget for the education department is 52,000. Yeah.
Correct. We had reduced by 57,000. I can't remember when we spoke to you guys last, but there was a $57,000 reduction and then a 52. So if you very well might be right.
All right, go ahead.
All right. So in terms of our current status, we definitely have more questions than we have answers. You'll see as we go through this that it's very complex, of course. The biggest piece that's complex on our end is obviously how this plays out. Do we go back to school as normal? Do we have some kind of hybrid setup? Do we go back, or do we not really go back and just engage in continued remote learning? And how long, if we do any of those things, how long do they last, if you will? And then we don't even know at this point the plan for the summer and the fall. I'm hoping to find out what the guidance is on the summer programming, especially for special education tomorrow. And by mid-June, we expect to have guidance from DESE and the state in terms of going back to school or not. I put in June. Oh, it's released in June, but obviously about end of August to September, what happens there. So these questions were right from Matt. What are the potential cost savings and turn back for FY20? We're expecting to be able to turn back about $350,000. As suggestions we put out there, and obviously I believe this would be for FinCom's advice, but I think the decision by the select board, I would assume, if they just don't simply take it back, it could be used to prepay tuitions to free up monies for FY21, or it could be put into that stabilization account for special education that was set up a few years back. I think there's $200,000 in there now.
So the intention behind that stabilization, the funding mechanism for that stabilization account, as I recall, was turnbacks, right?
Correct. That was supposed to be the feeding mechanism. Correct.
Got it. Okay. And then what tuitions are we talking about?
Oh, I'm sorry. Out of district tuitions. So we can always prepay those. It's something that districts do on an annual basis. It's very much by the book. This wouldn't be cutting corners or doing anything strange. We could prepay, in theory, that $350,000. That simply frees up monies to be utilized as needed for COVID-related unexpected expenditures in 21.
Got it. Have you and Tim had a discussion about this at all, or?
Over email, we've just kind of gone back and forth. Nothing's really substantial yet.
Got it. Okay.
In terms of service impact of the extra $52,000 reduction, as we've talked about numerous times over the past 11 months, we've focused heavily on how we can streamline our use of paraprofessionals. We believe that going into FY21 that we can do without 2 existing paraprofessional positions that won't be currently filled by people. They're existing positions, but we won't have to deal with unemployment by not filling those 2 of the paraprofessional positions, and that would close that $52,000 gap.
Do you have any expectations going into next year of, I know this is a tough question, but just, are you going to be seeing additional need for special education because these kids have not been in a classroom for so long? Like, how are you going to catch kids up and kind of re-baseline them?
Yeah, that's the multi-million-dollar question. Depending on how
I hope it's not multi-million dollars.
it probably will be. No, not for us. I mean, if it all depends. I know this is going to be really frustrating, and I'm not trying to not be 100% honest, but even the superintendents have no idea how it's going to play out. We are anxiously waiting for more guidance from the state, and then we can run with that and try to narrow down the 50 scenarios down to, maybe 30, and then 30 to 15, and just keep whittling it down until we have a real plan in place. In a very general sense, I would expect that, and this would be done statewide, I would expect that the state will work to streamline whatever the standards are for that grade level you're going into. So the 6th grader going to 7th, they're going to identify what's absolutely critical for that 7th grade year. And with that, be at least covering and reinforcing what was hopefully learned, but maybe not learned due to a lack of participation for a variety of reasons. So basically, in 1 year, get 1 1/3 year worth of standards in terms of instruction. That, in a general sense, is my guess, but that again is everybody going back, everything being as it always was. Any change to that is going to limit the ability of educators to do that, if that is the plan.
Got it.
So we talked about that service impact. What can we tell about this, the state aid, the worst case scenario? I mean, the worst case, obviously, you can fill in the blank with anything you like. It seems to depend on kind of the circles you're in. Among superintendents, there's been a lot of discussion about an expectation of 2 to 10% reduction in state aid. That's not based on anything factual, anything from DESE, anything from the state at this point. It's almost a rumor mill with slightly advanced, I guess, in that, I mean, these are people that are dealing with this day in and day out. Dan Gale, in his kind of finance director world, was initially hearing 10 to 20% state aid, specifically Chapter 70 reduction. It could be 0. I caught the part about Tim talking about municipal administrators discussing a lower percentage. I certainly hope that's the case, but in terms of, in my mind, the worst case scenario, I'm thinking a 10% reduction in Chapter 70. That would be a little over $1 million impact for Grafton. And then just, again, with that $350,000, if it was set up in a way that it could be accessed if needed, that would obviously help. Does it take care of the problem if we really do have $1 million budget hit? No, but it certainly would be helpful.
So that would be the prepay option.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
In terms of budget impacts from COVID-19 in FY21, again, it's going to depend on the scenario that's utilized in the fall. We've got those 3 different scenarios. In mid-June, the state is going to come out and give guidance as to what the fall looks like. I'll personally be surprised if there isn't some kind of remote learning, in-person learning hybrid, at least presented, with the thinking that if needed, if there's another spike or if there is a spike, say in August, and we have to change course depending on the severity of whatever we're facing, we'd have that as an option. We obviously have the remote learning. We don't have it down pat, but we're in a pretty good place with that. I would think we'd have some kind of hybrid, at least plan in place. And then obviously we know how to do business as usual if everything's going beautifully. So that's nothing more than a guess, but that's my guess. As I mentioned a little earlier, there are many variables at play, again, depending on which scenario is utilized and the duration of that scenario. If we knew that we were going to be, and I don't foresee this, but if we knew in the beginning of August that, okay, we're going to be remote learning for the rest of the year, we're going to have an increased need for technology, potentially some extra counseling remotely. So it all depends on what scenario or scenarios come into play in 21.
Okay. Would you guys be looking at like a new platform for remote learning?
At this point, I don't know. And I'm giving you tons of speculation. I want to just be, this is the last time I'll say it. This speculation is just based on my thinking.
I know. I'm just wondering, you are in those communities and, what's the best thinking at this point?
I assume or would think that if they have some kind of hybrid in place, you may have heard that some countries that opened up in some states in the US that have already gone back to school are doing like this thing where kids go for 1 week, like half the kids go for 1 week, the other half are doing remote learning. If we ran with that, there's really almost no way that we can have our teaching staff in front of kids at the same time providing quality remote learning. There's been a lot of talk about creating a statewide platform, be it privatized, be it homegrown over the next few months, but have something statewide in terms of that remote learning. So it's not like it is now where Grafton does its own thing, Westboro does its own thing, Millbury does its own thing. We're sharing resources. The kids who are doing the remote learning would tap into educators that are tied to a statewide platform. But again, that's just my thinking and some discussion that I've been privy to. So and certainly this is a scenario that I don't anticipate happening, but if we are purely remote learning next year, I would assume it's going to have to be a lot more in depth, a lot more interactive. It's going to have to be really redone statewide, certainly not just in Grafton.
Okay.
In terms of budget impacts continued, costs could include personnel for remediation and compensatory services for special education. So when we do go back, what do we need to do to get kids caught up if they are behind? What services, in addition to what we typically provide, do we need to provide to students to meet their goals, to further their IEP goals? I assume we're going to need additional counseling and potentially nursing staff. If we do any kind of hybrid that's not what I laid out earlier with the 1 week on, 1 week off, and there are countless variations. There are countries and potentially states, I can look into that are doing almost like split days, but they're not able to do just 2 half days. Once you have busing, it lengthens the day, which provides contractual issues, but you're adding busing, and busing is very expensive. PPE costs, we've already ordered masks, thermal scanners, hand sanitizer, etc. Most of that we're hoping to get reimbursed through the state. We're working in conjunction with Tim and the municipal side on that right now.
So in terms of that reimbursement, presumably if you needed to adopt like a new learning platform, or you needed additional technology, provided to kids, would that all be reimbursable potentially?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. Got it. All right, thanks.
Are there any cost avoidance opportunities if we don't open in September? We'd have similar savings to what we're seeing now, reduced day-by-day sub-costs and reduced transportation costs. Those are the two biggest ones. If we were told that we were going to be remote learning all year, we'd obviously have to take a look at personnel. We've by and large kept our personnel on staff. They've been engaged in professional development. They've been working with students, participating in our remote learning program. What that would look like if we knew it was going to be all year, which again, I don't think that's going to happen. That would be factored in there. And for the 100th time, that's the scenario that plays out depending on how it all works out. It's going to have an impact not only on the cost avoidance opportunities, but potentially on costs as well. So
Sure.
it's almost impossible. It is impossible to truly predict at this point. I was asked if we absolutely needed the $214,000 that would be restored in the contingency budget if we get an override passed. And we simply anticipate the need to focus on the challenges at hand rather than what we've been talking about over the past year with the FY21 budget requests. Currently, that 214 goes to reinstate that second GHS assistant principal position, tech integration specialist at the high school, and STEM curriculum coordinator that was cut back in FY17. So we anticipate dealing with reductions, potentially very significant reductions, and obviously we fully understand the need to use funds in a different manner given the unique circumstances. And I think that was it. I can take any questions anybody has. I'm sorry if I went too fast.
Nope, that was good. I can't see people's hands. Let's see. Any questions from anybody? Come on.
Mr. Chair, Tim McInerney, just, this whole, the 1.6, we're going to submit for the balance, whatever we come up with for numbers, whatever it is, if we don't have a complete plan for the fall for the school, the balance has to just be penciled in as a placeholder until we develop a platform plan around the school. And if we did see the 10% reduction, which could equate to $1 million, it'd probably be more because state aid is 12 million overall. So if it's cut across the board, 1.2, it's a whole different conversation relative to using stabilization and or free cash, or eliminating, as one of our board members suggested, forego a capital plan and just fund the operations because it's that necessary and that important. So it's troublesome if we had that impact, but we have resources to combat that, at least for one, worst case, maybe 2 years. And if it continues on, then you just, there's annihilation of operations in terms of town things. There's things that we just will not do because the educational reduction would be that catastrophic that you couldn't do it. But until we get there, I think we'll all agree if we did get there, we would use those funds at least 1 or 2 times. God forbid if you had to, right? I mean, I want to kind of coalesce around the fact that we're going to support that learning objective using one-time revenues in the absolute worst case scenario. And then the back job, Jay, is the foundation budget, minimum net school spending, and then you have the foundation budget, which is what's guaranteed from the state. I don't know where we are in terms of that number and over what their foundation commitment is. Of course, all those commitments get to change under COVID, but what is that delta? Do you know that?
Dan, do you happen, I don't know if Dan's on there. Dan, if anybody on hand, it would be Dan.
Yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Just relative to the foundation budget, the state has what it's going to give the municipality school district from state aid as a platform. And it gives additional money above and beyond, but it has a funding level commitment to the town. So out of the 10 million we get, is that, part of our foundation is their Chapter 70, correct?
Yes. So there's like a minimum local contribution, the town side. They're currently giving us on the state aid side. There's a minimum. It's kind of a hold harmless minimum aid that we get, and in FY20, it was about 300,000 or 350,000 more than what the foundation formula said we should get. So we've been getting hold harmless aid for more than 5 years now. So I think I'm not sure how that would play out in terms of if they were to do a 10% cut. I don't know if there's like a limit for them to cut at. But I have heard like that kind of hold harmless part could go away, or it has the potential of being cut. I believe it was cut. A lot of times, what we're looking at now is like what happened back in 2009, for example. Back then, they cut just did a flat 2% cut. That's kind of what Jay had put 2 to 10%, but the 2% kind of comes from what was done back in 2009. But also, for example, in 2009, the stimulus funds filled the gap, so there was no, reduction. We didn't have to reduce staff in 2009 because the stimulus funds filled the gap. So that's definitely what I'm hoping for in FY21. That if it was 2% or 10%, that stimulus funds would fill the gap for FY21.
Right. So I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath on federal stimulus funds at this point, though, but hopefully. So I was a little bit confused about that too. So I thought that there was a floor, but what you're saying is there really isn't a floor, that there's a mechanism for the state to actually get rid of that floor for temporarily, or how is it?
Yeah, I think in the law that the hold harmless that's around that 300,000 or 400,000 number. I don't think it's in the state constitution. Maybe is like that has to happen. It's the practice of the state and the Department of Education for a long time now. But I could find out more about the floor and email everyone.
I mean, I think that's really important, and that's, I've been trying to drive to realistically, based on what we know, what is that worst case scenario, and that floor seems like an important element of that.
Yeah, I haven't heard any conversation about the floor. Like some people are talking about 10 or 20% cuts, and I'm surprised I haven't heard about the floor, but I'll ask about that.
Okay. Go ahead, Colleen.
So I have a question. Some of the communities that are making larger cuts, like Dan just said, 10 or 20%, are those communities that we're seeing big increases because of the Student Opportunity Act? And since Grafton really wasn't going to see a big impact, or is this beyond that?
Yeah, when anybody's talking about a percentage cut of state aid, they're talking about below the FY20 levels. So if they were getting, let's say a 5% increase from like the Student Opportunity Act, they would not get that 5%, and then they'd get, let's say it's a 10% cut, they would get additional 10%. So everybody would get a 10% lower than they got in FY20. So the districts that were getting a lot of money up, or counting on a lot of money off Student Opportunity Act, are kind of double losing, twice.
Any other questions? Okay. So I guess just in terms of timing for the schools, when do things start to clarify for you guys in terms of planning and understanding what might happen from the state and all that? Is there anything emergent, or when do you start to get some smoke signals from the state?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It definitely keeps me up every night. Tomorrow we have another superintendent meeting with DESE and the Commissioner of Education. We hope to pull pieces out of that to give us guidance. I mean, we're right now, tomorrow, I'm hopeful to figure out, to get guidance on what we're doing this summer for special education. So that is indicative of kind of where we're at. We're in June. So once we get the summer addressed, obviously we're 100% focused on what fall is going to look like. So we meet virtually once weekly. So far, everything that's been of real substance and importance has come from the governor. I don't know, but at summer school will probably be a DESE announcement. But in terms of the next big step for us, we are told mid-June we will get state guidance, I'm assuming the governor, in terms of plans for the fall.
I'm sorry, did you say mid-June?
Mid-June is what they've consistently said.
Okay. That's good. Any other questions? All right, Sue, I know I'm missing something here. Tell me what I'm missing.
I think you're in great shape.
Okay, I think we should hold off the state of the town and discussion for tomorrow. And I don't think we need to get an update necessarily from the GSC. Is there anything anybody else wanted to discuss? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
To close.
Oh, hang on a second. Yep. So are we closing it or?
Continue, please.
Yes, I'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded by roll call. All in favor?
Roy, I.
Robbins, aye.
Kusher, aye.
Barry, aye.
Often aye. Irene?
I think Irene's muted.
I had to unmute myself.
Is that everybody? All right, motion passes.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tim. I appreciate it. Thanks, Becca.
Everyone, thank you.
And so do we need to adjourn now? I could do this procedural stuff.
Yes, if we're not going to, we can continue tomorrow night with our budget discussion and articles discussions, and that will be great.
Okay, let's do that then.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Roy, I.
Robbins, aye.
Kusher, aye.
Well, I.
Aye.
Often aye. Motion carries. Thank you all. Appreciate it.